Welcome, everybody, to the Armchair Dragoons digital convention. This is the OCS Bootcamp, and this is being broadcast both to the Discord server, which I actually need to do, and it is going to, let's see if this actually works. This is going to go to the YouTube channel as well. So I think we have that set up. There is so just so the participants know, I have the main channel text for the OCS Bootcamp up in Discord. So if somebody types something in there, then I will see it. I don't know if the folks watching on YouTube will hear the Discord chat audio or not. So I'm going to try to repeat every question that is asked. So we have 4 people tonight, and we are working with the Operational Combat series from Multiman Publishing and series designer Dean Essig. The particular game we are looking at is my personal favorite game to introduce people to OCS with, which is Smolensk Barbarossa Derailed. Part of that is because I've played through the opening so many times. So I'm going to kind of take this slow. This is not going to be we're not having a tournament here or anything. We are going to kind of explain things as we go. So as such, I have pulled out some German units, and we will explain what all of these particular units down here are and what all the numbers mean. Okay, we'll need to know this. There are, in every case, equivalent Soviet units. So this starts in July of 1941, so this is not very long after the launch of Operation Barbarossa. And historically, the Germans get delayed in this kind of swirling battle around the Soviet city of Smolensk. And this game is about that. It runs from July through September, beginning of September, as I recall, is about 25 or 30 turns. There's about 10 turns per month in OCS, and we'll talk about scale in a couple of minutes here. But it is a one map OCS game, which is not unheard of for OCS, but a lot of the OCS games are large, and OCS as a series has a reputation for the games being large. And this one is one map, and it's pretty easy to deal with. The counter density is not especially low, however, as we'll see as we get into it, because there are a decent number of reinforcements coming in. So overall, let me brief us on the overall tactical situation here, okay, or operational situation. So the Germans currently control about the westernmost 20%, 15% maybe of this map. You can see that there are German forces coming in from the west, and their objective is to take these victory point cities, most of which are in the back. We're obviously not going to get this far tonight. Rzhev is back here. Smolensk itself is a victory point city. Roslavel is one. It's fairly challenging for the Germans to get this done in the amount of time that they have. So that is essentially the game. The job of the Soviets is to delay the Germans, but that does not mean, it shouldn't be interpreted to say that Hissy, you're in the room, so you may need to click on file. Does everybody else see the map in Vassal? Okay, that's fine. So Hissy, is there any kind of pop-up box that you're seeing or anything like that? If anybody has questions, just chime in. Hissy is having trouble seeing the map in Vassal. I will point out that, as Steve O points out in the YouTube chat, that there is a Operational Matters issue number 2 is on pre-order from Multiman right now. It will have a very small OCS game in it. Yes, that is the magazine that had Sicily 2 in it, but the one that's on pre-order right now for Operational Matters number 1 is a reprint or second printing of Operational Matters number 1. The magazine's good too. Magazine's got a lot of good articles. However, if you are just getting into OCS, then I feel like you will not get the most out of the magazine articles, to be fair. I don't know if that's going to be true of the second issue or not. All right, so while you wait to hear from Hissy on this, I am going to zoom into some German units and explain what all this stuff is. All right. So over here we have, do I have an independent German unit? I don't. All right. So let's take this Soviet unit as an example. I am at the west edge of the map. There we go. Hissy's got the map now. I'm at the west edge of the map and I'm looking at that Soviet 161st Rifle Division, all the way to the edge, and then you can see the 29th Motorized. So this is like right on the left edge of the map in the middle. The folks on YouTube will be able to see this. And I think the stream is going to the Discord channel as well, but I'm not going to pay any attention to that. So this Soviet unit, I'll introduce this unit first because this is an independent unit. It is not, by definition, assigned to some higher level command. Some OCS games have some representation of higher level commands. Most games kind of do, but not really. You're not like limited to getting supply or command from a specific headquarters or anything like that. And we'll talk about that. So as long as this Soviet unit is in supply, and then this unit is good. It doesn't matter how he's in supply, as long as he's in supply, whether that's from a town or a dump or an HQ or whatever it is. So the first type of unit we're going to talk about is the headquarters unit. This is the German 47th 47th Corps. It doesn't say it's a Panzer Corps, but it might be. I don't know. And we see a symbol, which is just kind of a national symbol on headquarters. We see a unit size. The three X's at the top of the symbol indicate that it is a Corps HQ. And the number 47 just means that it's the 47th Corps. Okay. What happened to Reluctant Enemies being the intro game is it went out of print. It goes for like $150 now. That's the problem with that. So there's two numbers at the bottom of the headquarters. There's the 10 and the 0. Now, the 10 represents the throw range of the headquarters, and we'll get to what that means in a bit. In other words, that 10 is its headquarters power, right? That there you'll see some that might have 8s, you'll see some that might have 12s or 14s, depends on the game that you're playing. The second number is the movement. You'll notice that it has a movement of 0, and that means that it, in fact, cannot move the way it is disposed at the moment. If, however, we flip the unit over into, I'm going to flip the unit over into move mode. The Control F is the command to do that, the hotkey command to flip the selected units into move mode. You'll see that the numbers changed. The numbers now say 716. Now, that means that its throw range, its headquarters power, if you will, has decreased from 10 to 7. So it's a little less capable now than it used to be. However, now it has 16 movement points. So it can move now. Now, what this means for HQs is that they normally cannot move if they are not in move mode. And you determine what mode, and we'll get to this too, you determine what mode a unit is in technically at the beginning of the movement phase, but in practical terms, it's at the beginning of its movement. Okay, each turn. The turn structure is relatively conventional, but also a little bit involved, and we'll get into that as well. It is an I go, you go system, pretty much. There'll be a first player that's determined by an initiative roll, and then a second player. The first player will go, and then the second player will go. And we'll get into the sequence of play momentarily. But first, let's finish defining what stuff is on the units. Now, any questions on headquarters so far, with the caveat that we'll get into additional details about how this works later on. Awesome. All right, so now the rest of these units are the 29th Motorized Division. Now, we've got this counter right here. Now, this doesn't really represent anything. This just represents kind of a marker for the 29th Motorized Division. Some people elect to play with the forces effectively hidden and just move this unit around on the map, and then you'll keep the contents of that marker off map somewhere else, right? Most of these games do not have special displays for that, but lots of players play with that anyway. That is not an official rule. I think it might be an official optional rule. So we'll keep this on the map for now because there is a use for it that we'll see later. But right now, just remember that this counter in particular does not represent anything except sort of the status of the 29th Motorized Division. So we have 5 additional counters on the 29th Motorized Division. You'll see this one right here. This is I forget whether this is motorcycle. I think it's motorcycle cavalry. So you'll see that it's got a sort of yellow or banana stripe on it. That is the unit stripe for this multi-unit formation. So in this case, the 29th Motorized Division is considered a multi-unit formation. Soviets have multi-unit formations too. In this game, they don't have nearly as many as the Germans do. So this is one component of this, and I'll get to what the factors are in a minute here. Here we have a motorized infantry regiment. Here we have another motorized infantry regiment. Here we have an artillery unit, and here we have a truck. We'll get to the truck in a minute as well. Let's go back up to the motorcycle cavalry, and there's 3 numbers you'll notice at the bottom of this unit. There's the 4, which is the combat strength of the unit. That is the first number, or the number on the left. There is the 8, that is the red number in a yellow box. That is its movement. And I'll explain what the colors mean in a moment. So the number at the bottom of the counter, the one on the left, is the combat strength. The one on the right is the movement factor. The one in the middle, where there's a middle one, is the action rating. The higher, the better. This represents, it's kind of an abstract reflection of a lot of different soft factors that, like training and doctrine and all, low-level leadership, all that stuff. 5 is pretty much the highest you see in OCS. I can't recall anything higher off the top of my head, but they do go all the way down to 0. Which you'll see on some Soviet units, and especially early war Soviet units, and this is early war Soviet units. Now, check out this artillery unit down here. You'll notice that it has a 20, but that number is in a yellow box. That is not a combat strength. That yellow box means that it is a barrage strength. That is an artillery unit. And if this thing has to fight, then it has a combat strength of 1 normally. And then it's got a movement factor of 3. And you'll notice it has 2 numbers in the middle there. The topmost number is, so they're all 3s, right? The topmost 3, this 3 in the middle right here on the top, that is its action rating. Okay, action rating 3 for artillery is pretty good. The number underneath that, the other 3, is its range, which it gets because it is an artillery unit, a barrage unit. If I flip this, you'll notice that its barrage strength goes down to 10. Its action rating and range don't change, but it now has quite a lot more movement points than it did before. Okay. Lastly, the truck. Okay, now this is a truck. This has no combat strength. Something special happens if this gets overrun by an actual enemy unit. We'll talk about that. If it happens, we probably won't get to it. The 1, in this case, the number on the left, means that is how much supply it can hold. OCS has supply points, and that means that it can hold 1 SP. And the little F that you see in the middle there means that it's full, and it has 1 SP on it. And the 45 is exactly what you think it is. It's the movement rate, the movement points. Now, if we flip it over, you'll see, in fact, you'll see that I could keep clicking on it here. And the number keeps going down. And that means that you're using more and more of those supply points. If you just have the physical game, you'll see the 2 sides of the counter look like this and this. It's either full or empty. It's either full or not full. But if it's partially full, you'll have supply counters underneath it to indicate how much supply it is carrying. But it could carry a maximum of 1 supply point. We'll get to that as well. Now, this is the organic truck of the 29th Motorized Division, which means that nobody else can use that supply that is on this truck. There's a way to do it, but normally you don't want to, you are not allowed to use the supply for anybody but the unit that the truck belongs to. Now, there are trucks that don't belong to units too, so don't worry about that. We'll see those when we get to them. Okay. So there's one more additional thing that I should explain as far as what's what on the counters. Now, you'll notice that here we have this HQ. It's got 16 movement points, but it's that number is in black. It's a 16 in black. You'll notice that this motorized infantry regiment has 3 movement points, but that number is in white. And this motorcycle cavalry has 8 movement points, but that number is red and in a yellow box. That means something. So we have 3 different types of movement in OCS. We have leg movement, truck movement, and tracked movement. So tracked movement is pretty much tanks. Truck movement is anything on wheels. And leg movement is anything on feet, whether it's 2 feet or 4 feet. And we might see that comes up later on as well. So here, if I have this, let me flip this one back over. You'll see that the HQ, most HQs will have truck movement rates because it's a command staff and a logistical base, and you've got to move the supply around. So you're doing that on trucks. So in general, the HQs will have truck movement. Different types of terrain interact differently with the 3 different movement types. So leg tends to be able to move relatively freely through not only clear terrain, but say woods as well with no particular problem. It's a much bigger deal to move trucks through the woods unless they're on a road, in which case they're on road terrain for movement purposes. You'll notice running through the middle of the map, there is what looks like a road and what looks like a railroad, and that is exactly what they are. The red sort of hashed lines is a railroad. And because it's like a double line, it is actually a double rail line. Now, that's probably not going to be important for our purposes tonight, but that does mean something specific as opposed to the single rail lines that run out of Orsha in a couple of other directions here. Okay. I'm going to put all of these units back where they go. And we'll get to all that in a actually, you know what? Let me pull. Whoops. I'll pull this guy out because this is the one I was going to use as an example. So this is the 15th Motorized Infantry Regiment. I'm going to flip this over. You'll notice that on its front side, it's got 3 movement points and 8 combat strength. And on its back side, it's got 4 combat strength and 14 movement points. But also notice that its movement type has changed. It's a motorized infantry unit. If these guys want to move in a motorized way, they are putting the troops on trucks and shuttling them around. These 2 different sides of the counters are known as, this is a little bit confusing because move mode and combat mode do not, strictly speaking, refer to the 2 sides of the counter because there are other modes other than those 2 that a unit can have. However, there is a combat side and a move side, and normally, unless there's some other marker on there, that will indicate the mode that the unit is on unit is in as well. Other modes include disorganized mode or strategic move mode. There's reserve mode, those are modes as well. Okay. Now you can be in another mode, but be on your combat side or your move side. And whatever side is showing when you're looking at it is the side whose numbers you use. Okay. The only time that you'll flip the counter from move mode to combat mode is at the beginning of its movement in your movement phase. Okay. Many units will have the same movement type on both sides, but there are a few that won't. If we take this motorcycle cavalry again, let's flip that one over. You'll see that it gets now 16 movement points, but its combat value is now a 2. The red movement in the yellow box means that it is tracked movement. The white movement factor, say on the infantry unit, is leg movement, and the black number is truck movement. Truck is the most restricted of the movement types. Okay. All right. So that is a basic breakdown of what you are looking at on the units, and that will get you started with OCS as far as it goes. Any questions about that so far? All right, I'll take that as everybody gets it. So that is cool. All right, so now back here at this entry hex right here, entry hex J. That's all this means is that it's a J, and that it is entry area J. Let me put it that way. You'll see that there's a couple of things here. This thing right here is an airbase, and this is actually considered a unit, but it is a non-combat unit. Okay, and right now there's no aircraft on it, so it's kind of irrelevant. And this thing right here is a supply counter. Now, I mentioned earlier that there are supply points or SPs, all right, and you use supply points to do things in the game. We'll get to that. However, each supply point can be broken down into 4 tokens. So when we see, for example, here that this is 2T, that means it's 2 tokens or half a supply point. Supply points are entirely fungible. You can break them down at any time and move them around independently, but they cannot move on their own. They have to be moved in certain restricted ways. Okay. Now, looking at our, it's going to be German turn first here, by the way, in Smolensk specifically. I'm looking for the German air setup, and that is not showing in Vassal. So if you click in the Vassal module, if you click on the box on the button at the top that says offboard boxes, and then click on German setup or Russian setup, the only things that should be still there are probably just aircraft. So let me explain one other thing about air bases here before we move on. What air bases do we have? We have one down here in Bobrusk. We have one down here on the main road that runs through Smolensk. That is the Smolensk to Moscow high, or the Kiev. Is it Kiev or Minsk? Minsk to Moscow highway. That's what that is. All right. So we've got 2 air bases on the map here. You can build air bases in play, by the way, and it costs supply points. So you'll notice that this one has a 1 on it. That's the one on the main highway. And then the one down here in Bobrusk has a 2 on it. That is the level of the airbase. All right. They can have levels 1, 2, or 3. A couple of OCS games also have air strips that are sort of like half an airfield. That means that twice that number is the maximum number of air that can be refreshed each turn. And we'll get to that. So right now, I'm going to take a couple of I'm going to take 4 German aircraft, and I'm going to put them on this base down here. Now, the convention for stacking is that that's another thing I'll need to talk about here. The OCS convention for stacking is that you are not allowed to examine other players' stacks. You may see the combat unit that is on the top, or if it's not a combat unit that's on the top, you can ask if there's a combat unit and you can see it. Okay. The other convention is that air units go on the top of the stack. Okay. And of the air units, the fighters should go on the top of the stack. So let me talk about air units here. There's 2 kinds of air units that I'll introduce you to. There are more. There are also transports and strategic bombers, but these are the ones that we need to worry about here today. So I pulled out this BF-109F and this Ju-88. Okay. The first thing we'll notice is that there's an aircraft designation and a silhouette and the stuff that makes the counter pretty. Okay. None of that is important in game terms in any way. In the upper left-hand corner of the air unit counter, however, there is a symbol that corresponds to the type of aircraft that it is. There are fighters, there are tactical planes, there are strategic bombers, and there are air transports. We're only going to talk about fighters and tactical bombers here today. All right. And then there's 2 numbers at the bottom of the counter. There's an air-to-air rating and a tactical rating. All right. So if we look at the BF-109, you'll see that it has a 4 air-to-air rating. That's what it uses if it's fighting other aircraft, whether they're fighters or not. And then the Ju-88 has a 2 air-to-air rating, but you'll notice that it's in parentheses. What that means is that it cannot be used to attack. It only uses that combat strength in defense. All right. And there are land units that use that notation too. So if you'll see like a static unit, sometimes police units will be like this. You'll see that the combat strength is in parentheses. That means it is not attack capable. Now you'll also see the 12, the number in the lower right-hand corner. It's a 12 on the JU-88, and it's a 1 on the BF-109. For the JU-88, that means that it has a 12 tactical factor. That tactical factor, and we'll get to this, is used exactly like barrage is used. All right. So now I am going to refer us to the Smolensk game specific rule book. Now, OCS, like every Dean Essig series game, has a series rule book and a game specific rule book. And all of this material is available. I'm not sure if it's up for Crimea yet. Crimea is the latest OCS game, came out like a month and a half ago. Not sure that's up there yet, but for every other game, you can go to the Multiman website, look at the support part of the website. This used to be on Gamers Archive. It's all on Multiman's site now. You can click on the OCS page, and it'll take you into another page where you can drill down and get the game-specific rules for any OCS game. This is true of, again, all of the Gamers series, or the series rules and series charts. So I've got the series rules pulled up here. Now, one of the things we need to know, let me start this way. One of the reasons why I think Smolensk is such a good intro game for OCS is because there really is kind of a minimum of game specific rules. Okay. However, for every OCS game, you do need to look at the game specific rules because there are certain things that are always in the game specific rules. One of those things is the terrain effects chart, and that is just usually on the back of the game specific rule book. Another thing like that is a particular type of air mission called a hip shoot. Okay. And these we'll get to this because we're going to use it. Okay. The game specific rules will tell us which aircraft can hip shoot and which can't. Aircraft cannot hip shoot at all unless the game specific rules say that they can. But the rules for hip shoots are obviously in the series rule. Okay. And that's one of a whole bunch of different types of air missions that we can fly. Does someone have a question? I heard somebody say something, but I couldn't make it out. That could be. That could be. All right. So, in the case of, I'm looking for the Axis Special Rules hip shoots. So the Germans in this game can conduct hip shoots. Okay. I think you need to be a tactical plane to do a hip shoot, but if that's not the case, it's normally, unless you've got weird planes, it would be dumb not to use a tactical planes for hip shoots. We'll see that when we get to we'll see an actual hip shoot here. Let me put it that way. All right. So other than requiring us to set up the air units, which we have now done. Now you'll notice here that I have put an extra plane on this airfield, which means that it can only refresh in that phase up to twice its airfield rating. Okay, so it can only refresh 2 planes, and that's just by planes. It costs a token to refresh the air units at an airbase. Okay, this is a thing that is a little bit different in some of the newer games. There are also off-map airfields. If you look at, again, clicking on the off-board boxes, you'll see that there's off-map boxes for German airfields and Russian airfields. And if we look at, I'm just going to put these here. I'm just going to put the German planes here. If you look at the Luftwaffe off-map box, for example, it will say at the bottom, 30 hexes to the west edge, and there's unlimited refit. That's generally true of off-map boxes, and it is in this game, but it's not necessarily true of every single OCS game. Sometimes there'll be a limited refit on an off-map box, but that's not the case here. All right, so I'm going to pull up the Soviet stuff too. because we're going to throw down a Soviet aircraft or two. All right. So Soviet airfields. We've got an airfield in Orsha. So I'm going to throw an aircraft in Orsha here. We've got an aircraft in or airfield in Vitebsk. I'll put one there. And you've got an airfield in Mogilev. I'll put an aircraft there. And we will keep all of the other Soviet air in the off map boxes. Because chances are excellent that all that Soviet air will get shut down. All right. So now I'm going to direct us to the sequence of play. Okay. Now, if you're looking at the charts and tables, let me pull up a different set of charts and tables here because I got some kind of cock up charts and tables. There we go. All right. So I'm looking at the 4.3 charts and tables. This is the current version of the rules. I put the 4.2 in the chat earlier. The differences in the rules between different versions of OCS are at this time minuscule, virtually microscopic. Okay. So don't worry about it. I get asked this all the time, so I'll say this as well. You can play any game in the OCS series with the current rules and charts, except the very first game, Guderian's Blitzkrieg. There is a Guderian's Blitzkrieg 2 that updates it and expands it quite a bit. So if we look at the sequence of play, which is on the first page of the charts and tables, I'll buzz through this and then we'll actually start executing. Okay, there's a pre-turn phase. All right. So as I mentioned before, there's a first player turn and a second player turn. Before either of the player turns, there's a pre-turn phase. During that, the pre-turn phase, we determine the weather and we determine who has initiative. And in some OCS games, we will also determine if there are random events. There are no random events here in Smolensk. Okay. So that's the pre-turn phase. Then we will move to the first player turn. The first phase will be an aircraft refit phase. We're not going to have to worry about that on the first turn. The second phase will be reinforcements. We'll see if we have to worry about that or not. The third phase is movement, and that happens in a particular order, and we'll talk about that. And I think we will get to that too. Into a place where that order of execution is actually important. Okay. After movement, you have a supply phase. Then there is a reaction phase. That is when the non-phasing player, the player whose turn it isn't right now, will get to react. Okay. The Soviets, as I recall, do not start with reserve markers in this game. They do get some after the first turn. But the Germans will start with reserve markers and will actually place some in a minute here. But the non-phasing player can react with reserve units in the reaction phase. All right. So after that, there's a combat phase, and that's when the phasing player, the player whose turn it is, will do their combat. So we just want to emphasize that order. Okay. Movement, check supply, reaction, so the other person's reaction, and then combat. So the other player may have the opportunity, depending on what's going on exactly, to spoil your combat. After the combat phase, there is an exploitation phase. That is a phase in which the phasing player can either execute an exploit, which is potentially something you can get off the combat results table, or they can move their reserve markers. Okay. And you can, again, that in that phase, you can move and barrage and combat. And then there's a cleanup phase in which, at which time you'll pull some markers off. We'll deal with that. And then the other player goes. All right. All right. Any questions about that basic sequence of play? Because if not, I am going to start walking us through it. All right. So I'm going to pull up. I got to remember where the reserve markers are here. So give me a second. In the module, that is. There we go. All right. So let's check this. All right. So there are no German reinforcements on the first turn. So this is what we have. So we got to think about: is there any of the? So the scenario will actually tell us what units are in reserve. So let's take the 10th motorized and put them in reserve. Let's take this first cavalry and put them in reserve. And that's probably it. Nope, I'm wrong. Let's take the 12th Panzer and put them in reserve. Okay. All right. So that looks good. That is something you'll have done during setup. Okay. The scenario will specify that the Soviets, and they do in this case, the Soviets will set up first and then the Germans set up. And that setup includes most of the units will be in a specific location. Sometimes you'll see within, set these units up within 3 hexes, set these units up, these air units with at any air base. That will happen. But in Smolensk, it's more or less what you get. You'll also be given a specific number of reserve markers that you have allocated to you. And this is a resource, right? So you'll have a specific number of reserve markers, and that's all you have unless you get more. And sometimes, based on the order of arrival, you will get more, and sometimes some will get taken away. That will sometimes happen as well. Won't happen here, but it sometimes will happen. All right. So the scenario has specified that the weather is clear, so we don't need to roll that. The scenario has also specified that the Germans are going to win initiative. It may actually say that they go first, but in this case, that means they're going to go first. Now, I'll explain initiative, however. One of the first things you'll do before you take the individual player turns is you'll determine who has the initiative for the turn. This is very simple. You roll 2 dice, the other side rolls 2 dice. Whoever rolls higher has initiative for the turn. If there's a tie, you re-roll. That's it. There's at least 1 and maybe 2 OCS games where there's an additional, at least potential DRM to that roll. But Smolensk is not one of them, and that is very unusual. There is also in Smolensk, there's also like a cooperation role between Guderian and Hoth in this particular scenario, because one is controlling the German forces on the north side of the map, and one is controlling the German forces on the south side of the map, and they hate each other. So they have certain limits on cooperation. We're ignoring that for our purposes today. That's probably the most important single game specific rule in Smolensk, by the way. All right. So if we look back at our sequence of play, we'll also notice we'll begin the first player turn. The German player has initiative, and having initiative allows you to say whether you're going to go first or you're going to let or I shouldn't say let, I should say force the other player to go first. In this case, there are many occasions in OCS where you will choose to go second. This is not one of those. This is the German player really would like to go. Soviet movement is, as I recall, halved on the first turn. So the German player is going to say, I'm going to take the initiative, and we're going to go. Okay. So the first phase in the German player turn is the aircraft refit phase. However, no aircraft have been used. We'll talk about this in a few minutes as well. So we don't have any aircraft to refit. Next, we have this is an important piece of sequencing here. That happens before supply comes in. All right. So you can't refit your aircraft with the supplies that you just got. Okay. Checking on one supply thing here. All right. So if you look at the last page of the Smolensk game specific rules, you will see that there is an Axis supply table and a Soviet supply table. So we are going to roll because the scenario doesn't tell us to not. A lot of times you won't make this roll on the first turn of the game, but during that reinforcement phase, you're going to roll for replacements. You're going to put place any reinforcements that enter, but there aren't any this turn, and you are going to roll for supply. If you look at that table, there is an early column and a late column for the Germans. So whoever would like to be nominally in charge of the Germans in the vassal module, please give me a 2d6 roll. There are no DRMs to this, but it is on the early column. If nobody's going to roll 2d6, I am going to roll 2d6. So let's roll 2d6. So that is a 3 and a 2, which is a 5. So what that means is that the Germans get 5 supply points. Not great. Actually, quite poor, to be honest. Now, the German supply comes in at the map edge. Okay, so that means any of these map edge hexes that, so entry area K, J, I, H, and G are the places that the German supply comes in. So I'm going to go and find some supply points. All right. And the vassal module will actually allow you to increase. So I'm going to go, we'll put 2. I'll clone it. So we'll have another one of those. And we'll clone it again. So I'm going to take these 5 supply points. All right. And we'll definitely put 3 of them here at this rail junction where it's coming in. And I think I'll put, let's actually split this one. Put this one up here. And this one right here. All right. Now you notice that down here in Babrusk, there's actually 5 supply points already. So they need a little less supply. We'll talk about what we use supply for in a moment here. So that is the German reinforcement phase. Question. Is there a question? All right. I will assume that was another microphone slip up. All right. So we're going to go to the German movement phase. Now, the movement phase has 3 segments in it. There used to be another one. There used to be a mode determination segment, but nobody actually played it that way because technically what that meant was that you had to go through the entire map, which could potentially be several hundred counters, determine what the modes were going to be for everything before you started moving anything. Nobody did it that way. Everybody made that decision at the beginning of the unit's movement. Okay, so that's how we do it now. That is actually a rules change from a very long ago edition. The 3 phases in the movement phase are the breakout segment, which I'll explain briefly in a minute, but we'll probably see it toward the end of the turn. The end in sometime in the next turn, I should say. The movement segment, which is where obviously the movement happens, and then the air naval barrage segment. So that means that where you are barraging with aircraft, it happens in the movement phase, but it happens after all the movement. Okay, and there's a thing we're going to see in a second. So, looking at the German disposition on the map here, we're gonna this is the Dnieper River, this big river that's kind of running up the southeast southern edge of the map here. That's the Dnieper, and the Germans are going to have to get across that. All right. In order to get across that effectively, they're going to need to be able to get supply across that. Now, that doesn't mean trucking supply points around, although that can be part of it. But it definitely means the ability to throw supply across the river. And we'll talk about supply throw in a second here. You're going to have a logistical throttle on your units that is supply. It is called supply in OCS, but it really represents like your ability to control operational tempo, right? Because there's a number of pieces to it, one of which is the actual supply points, and the other of which is the headquarters ability to throw the supply. All right. So, um, so we can see that the Germans have like a bunch of quite powerful units, but they're going to need to get on the other side of this river, and the terrain. There's a really nice open tank country behind the Dnieper here. It'd be great for the Germans to be able to run wild over there. So we need to get the Germans across this river, but we're going to start at the north end of the map. And the way this ends up working is we have a Soviet unit. This is in hex 1231. Okay, so it's the hex I have highlighted. There's a how does that work? There you go. It's Alt left click lets you like highlight a particular hex. Let's check the chat here real quick. All right. Sorry if the stream is fuzzy for anybody that's not in the Vassal module. There actually isn't anything that I can do about that. It is as good as it's going to get. So I apologize for that, but there's not much I can do. All right. So, so looking here at hex number 1231. All right, we see that there's a Soviet. There's a button, by the way, the little globe button on the top toolbar that will hide all the units. All right. So we've got a Soviet rifle division here in a swamp that has got to be moved out of the way. All right. And I think we're going to rely on the 20th Panzer to do that. This is when we did this same demo at Buckeye Game Fest a few years ago. Hilariously, this 20th Panzer annihilated itself against this rifle division. So it was actually awesome. I'll point this out too, actually, because there's one other factor on the counters that I didn't mention before because it wasn't on any of the counters I was looking at. So on this Soviet rifle division here, you're going to see that there's a little 2 inside a gold circle to the left of the unit symbol. That is the number of steps that the unit has. Okay, so this rifle division has 2 steps. All right. Now, there is an optional rule called proportional losses in OCS, which I'm going to try to remember not to use here because we always use it. In this case, there are units with more than 2 steps. You'll see if we see a German, I'm not sure where there might be one at the moment. If we see a German infantry division, those will tend to have 4 steps. I'm not actually sure there's even one on the map at the moment. There might be, but I don't see one. But generally, units will have, unless it says there's a step indicator on the counter has 1 step. There is an exception to that, which we're not going to talk about here because, well, I guess I'll mention it. If an individual unit has more than 10 combat strength, then it's got at least 2 steps. So sometimes you'll see like a tank brigade or tank regiment that will, or like a U.S. combat command that will have like a combat strength of like 12 or 14. That's a 2-step unit. All right. Now, you'll notice that there's a skull marker under this 186th Soviet Rifle Division. That means that it has taken 1 hit, or 1 step down. The standard rule is that the unit functions at full capacity until it is half down or more, at which point its combat strength is halved. Proportional losses optional rule will actually make you do the math and say you have, 1 out of the 4 steps have been lost in your infantry division. You'll actually have to apply, 75% strength to it. So there are regimental. Joe Prez mentions in the YouTube chat there. When I'm saying steps, I'm going to actually get to REs. The RE or regimental equivalent is kind of not exactly equivalent to steps in OCS. But most units are, in fact, a regimental equivalent. The units that aren't are anything smaller than a regiment. So, like this Pioneer Battalion here is half an RE. And any unit that is more than 1 step is a number of REs equal to its steps. unless it is one of those funny individual units with a combat strength of more than 10, which makes it a two-step unit, but it's still 1 RE. Okay, so that's why I didn't really want to get to that. But yes, the regimental equivalent is like the standard measure of unit size. Unless there's something telling you otherwise, then a unit is an RE, and an RE is equivalent to a step almost all the time. But like, so this Soviet Rifle Division is 2 REs at full strength. Right now it's at half strength, so it's only 1 RE. This German Pioneer Battalion is half an RE because it's a unit smaller than a regiment. Okay. And if we look at the 20th Panzer and say, look at this tank battalion, this is half an RE, this is half an RE. There'll be some regiments here. These will be REs. There is a separate rule, however, that means that says that for purposes of determining barrage, I don't want to say defense against barrage. For when you determine, I'm trying to think of how to best put this. I'm stumbling because I've had a long day already. So if a unit is barraged and it's all the units of a single multi-step formation are counted as one unit for purposes of defending against a barrage. We'll deal with that if it comes up, but it's one of those finicky little rules. Okay. All right. So next up we have well, let's actually kind of take this. The combat, we're going to see the combat here in a moment. The combat in OCS is quite straightforward, with one wrinkle that you may not have seen in other games, and that is the surprise mechanic. However, we are going to, before we do this, we're beginning the German movement phase, and these are the first units that we are going to do. Now, the first thing that we will do is this Pioneer unit is going to spot for an air barrage. Now, remember when I said that air barrages happen after all the movement? That's true, except for hip shoots. Hip shoots happen during movement, and that is why hip shoots are very significant. So we are going to fly, and remember, we said the Germans can fly hip shoots in this game. Soviets cannot. We're going to fly this JO-88 that we just placed on a hip shoot barrage mission against that Soviet half rifle division. So we're going to go, and we'll see that it's got a 12 tactical value. That means that it has 12 barrage factors. We're not going to be able to see, for anybody watching on YouTube, you're going to have to follow along with the OCS charts yourself. On page 3 of or page 4 of the OCS charts and tables, you will see the barrage table. All right. So there, across the top of that table, there are a series of columns. We have 12 barrage factors, so you're going to be on the 12 to 16 column. Okay. Now, there is terrain in the hex. If we move this stuff, we'll see that it is a swamp hex. If there's more than one terrain in the hex, the defender gets to pick what modifier they get. In this case, swamp is considered very close terrain. So that is going to provide a beneficial column shift for the Soviets. All right. So that's going to shift us down to the 8 to 11 column. Furthermore, there is only one RE in that hex. So that is going to shift us down one more. Okay. There is a proper spotter. That's that Pioneer unit. So we're not going to worry about that. All right. Now we could potentially fly more hip shoots against this, but you've got to make decisions about how many of these planes you want to blow on hip shoots, because you might want some of these planes. Once, we'll see this in a second, once the plane flies its mission, it's done for the turn until it gets refit. So you got to make decisions right away as to what planes you could hip shoot with and what planes you need to save for the combat phase, right? Or a later barrage phase. All right, so we're just, nope, it's a Deanism. So what it means, though, is really just close air support. That is done in a combined arms way. So it's it's intended, and you'll see this if it works. You'll see that I'm getting a message that says Carl is not using the same vassal module version as the room owner. If Carl's looking on, that's cool. Let us know if it causes any problems, but I don't think it does. So, all right. So, no, hip shoot is not an actual military term to my knowledge. I think it's just one of those cute pieces of jargon that Dean came up with, and everybody has adopted it. And it's really close air support, combined arms close air support. So it's intended to be used. There's no reason for me to hip shoot something unless I'm going to attack it. All right. So my objective here is, and now I'm going to give you a piece of tactical advice and not gameplay instruction. It's generally not a great idea to count on doing any actual hits of damage with a barrage of any kind. What you're really after is to disorganize the unit. Okay. And we'll see that if it works. So somebody give me, so we're on the 12 to 16 column, but we're 2 columns down, one for 1 RE or less in the hex and one for very close to raid. So we're actually rolling on the 5 to 7 column. So somebody give me, whoever wants to play the Germans, give me a 2d6 roll in Vassal. Okay, outstanding. Chet has rolled an 11. So if we cross-reference that 11 on the 5 to 7 column, you're going to see that the result is a 1/2. Now, the results will either be, there'll be a DG, which just means the unit gets DG, which is disorganized. And we'll see what that does in a minute. Okay. Or you'll see a 1/2, or you'll see a 1 or a 2. But sometimes if there is a number, it will be in a bracket. All right. And what the bracket means is if it is an air barrage or a ship barrage, then it's just a DG. All right. There's no DGs in brackets. So right now you've got an unbracket. The result here that we have is an unbracketed 1/2. So Chet, give me a D6 roll. You have rolled a 2, all right, which means that you have not. So what the 1/2 means is that you have a half a chance or 50% chance to also do a hit to the unit, which would kill the unit here, I will point out. But you didn't get 4 or more, so you're actually not going to do that hit. We call that extra die the kicker. When we're playing this physically, we will normally roll 2 dice of one color and a 3rd die of another color, and that 3rd die will be the kicker, so we'll know we don't have to have a separate roll. So the rifle division is disorganized. So we DG it. All right. Now what this means is that it's halved. Its combat is combat value is halved, and its movement value is halved. Now, this plane has finished its work. It now goes into the used section. And I'm going to pull up that German offboard boxes. That's not the one. Hold on. German airfields. And it flew in from down here, but this airfield does not have the capacity to refit it. So it will actually fly over to the off-map airfield. The bottom of that off-map airfield box says it's 30 hexes to the west map edge. So basically, the 106 range on the JU-88 is more than enough. All right, I don't really have to keep that on the map as such. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now we could have flown a Soviet interception mission on that, but we didn't, and that's okay. And I'll show you how that works when we get to the bottom of the map. Right now, I'm going to show you at combat. So the unit I'm going to use is the 20th Panzer Division. Okay, now it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 combat units, one of which is an artillery unit. We also have a truck, which is full, which holds 1 supply point. Organic trucks attached to a particular multi-unit formation. I'm not sure I've ever seen one that has more than 1 supply point. capacity, that is. Um, and it's full at the moment. Now, we are going to need to fuel this division if we want to do anything with it, and if that includes moving it. So we are going to. We need to get supply for that. So there's a couple of different ways to fuel units. One, if all right, we're back. Sorry about that. That was a Chrome tab crash. It's been happening. So there's three ways to fuel units. One, you can, if it's an independent unit, it can be fueled by a fueled headquarters, and I'll explain that in a minute. I'm not sure we're going to see that in the amount of time we have tonight. You can fuel an entire multi-unit formation at once, or you can spend supply per unit to supply that unit. All right. In order to fight at all, or to move, if it is a unit that requires fuel, so trucks, tanks, that kind of stuff, you need to spend supply. It has to be fueled. All right. So the most efficient way to do this is to fuel the entire multi-unit formation at once. Regardless of the size of the multi-unit formation, it costs one supply point to do that. Now we'll notice the 20th Panzer up here. This 20th Panzer marker will have a backside with a fuel tank on it, and that will tell us the 20th Panzer is fueled, and it will stay fueled for the entire turn. Otherwise, things only stay fueled for a single phase. Okay. Now, this will cost one supply point, so I have to figure out where that's coming from. All right. So supply can either be spent off the map directly, or it can be thrown to the unit by a headquarters. All right. Now, in this case, we're going to throw it from the headquarters. Here's the headquarters, the 39th Corps HQ in Leppel is going to throw one supply point to the 20th Panzer Division. What's its range, you ask? Well, it's that headquarters power. That 10 is its range in movement points. It's a black range, so it is truck movement points. Now, what that means effectively is if it's on a road, you're pretty much good. If it's not on a road, you might have a problem, all right, depending on how much that works. Now, in Smolensk, I did mention earlier that in OCS games, the terrain effects table is specific to each individual game. So we actually have to find that in the game-specific rules for Smolensk. We're going to see that for truck movement points, both primary and secondary roads, this main, what looks like this main road running through Vitebsk here, that's actually a secondary road. Is there a primary road on this map? There might not be. There's not. A primary road will be white. Okay. And then this road with the sort of dashed outline, that is a track. So for truck movement in Smolensk, secondary roads cost 1/2 movement point for hex, and for tracks it costs 1. So what we're going to see here is this is the one I'm going to use. So we're going to see that it can throw up to 10 truck movement points. So let's grab a KTX marker here. All right. Now, the way you count this is that you're either throwing supply or you're drawing supply. I'll explain the difference in a second. In this case, the headquarters is throwing the supply. So I'm going to go 1 movement point, 2 movement points, 3 movement points, 4 movement points, 5 movement points. All right, to get me to where 20th Panzer is. So that headquarters is in range, no problem. Now, where can the headquarters get the supply from? It can go back 5 movement points. All right. So what that means is it can go back 1, 2 and a half to there. All right. So this one supply point on the map edge is within draw range. The HQ is drawing this supply, and I'm just going to move it off map, is drawing this supply and throwing it to the 20th Panzer Division. All right. And then the 20th Panzer will use that to be fueled. Now, the next thing I need to do with 20th Panzer, though, is decide what modes these units are going to be in. So let's grab one of these. Here's this tank. Okay, here's a tank battalion. And this is its combat mode side, and this is its movement mode side. You'll notice that its combat strength will normally be about halved. Joe Perez, there is some, I want to say in GB2, there's this primary road leading into Moscow. It's fairly uncommon to see primary roads. Often you just see secondary roads. So I got to decide whether I need to keep these guys in move mode or in combat mode. Now, obviously, they're going to move a lot farther if they're in move mode, and we want to move them. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put all these guys in move mode. Now, this will make a big difference for the motorized infantry because in combat mode side, their combat value is a 7 and their movement road is 3, but it's leg. Now it's combat value 4, but their movement is 16, but it's truck. So that makes a big difference. And we'll definitely move the artillery as well. Now, the trucks don't have a movement side. They just have 45 truck movement points in that side. All right. So we've just put the whole division in move mode. All right. And we're gonna start trucking with this division here. So go ahead. You can. They don't have to be all in the same mode. In fact, a lot of times, let's say I really want to keep the additional punching power of these tank brigades, and maybe I do here, right? Because we've got more or less clear terrain behind this. So let's do it that way. So what I've done now here is I have put the armored or at least tracked assets in combat mode, but the infantry in move mode. Okay, there's nothing wrong with doing that. In fact, I don't even have to make that determination all at once. The only reason I'm doing that here is because I'm moving the entire stack at the same time. So you make that mode determination when you start moving the units. All right. Does that answer the question? Okay. Now, let's evaluate the combat value of this Soviet rifle division, or I should say half a Soviet rifle division. So because it's half or more steps down, it's halved. Because it's DG'd, it's halved. So that means that 12 halved and halved again is 3 combat value. All right. So I don't really need a ton of combat power out of 20th Panzer Division here. All right. In fact, maybe what I want to do is not run with the entire division. Right? Maybe I don't want to attack with the entire division. Maybe we just attack with these 3 units. How's that sound? All right. So these 3 units will remain in combat mode. All right. And that's going to give us 14. So that's going to be a 4-1. It's going to be more than that. I'll explain it in a second. All right. So these 3 units are going to spend track for tracked movement class is 1 movement point per hex. So this is going to take us to 1 movement point, and then we're going to do what's called an overrun. All right. Overrun is a type of combat that occurs in the movement phase. It costs 3 times the trying to find whether it's so it I don't think I can overrun into this hex. This is so I think there's a rule that says that you can't so the general rule to determine how you overrun is that it costs 3 movement points to overrun. Okay. If the hex costs more than 3 to enter, you may not overrun to do it. In this case, this is a prohibited hex uh, because it's a swamp for tracked movement, but they'd be entering it on a road. So I cannot overrun that with those units. What is the swamp for leg units is 3. So the only way I'd be able to do that with leg units is to yeah, and I can't go around it either. Yeah. And Joe Prez mentioned something about the combat. This is actually I'm actually okay with this though. Since there's plenty more there. No, this is actually if we could do this, this is actually a pretty good attack. This is um 4-1 up 2, up 3. That's a pretty good attack. Um so we're stuck here. We're actually not going to be able to make that attack. So let's figure out what we're actually going to do with the rest of these units. We can move the infantry. I'll tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to retrofit this. This is technically a decision I would have needed to make before the beginning of the turn, but I'm going to do it right now anyway. I can no, that's actually not true. I can do it here. I'm going to put these units in reserve. I'm going to rethink what I'm doing here actually. So let's pull this reserve marker off. Pull this out. I'm going to actually do it this way. I'm going to keep the infantry all right. So here's what we're doing. We put the entire formation into move mode, except for the 2 infantry units. But we're also going to put reserve on them, and I can do that at the beginning of their movement because I have reserve markers available. These 2 infantry units will remain in combat mode, and they will advance 1 hex forward. For is it 1 for leg? Yes, it's 1 for leg. So they'll spend 1, and that's all they can do. So they're done. All right. So moving along. Let's move to the southern end of the map here and determine what is happening down here near Mogilev. Now, Mogilev, this area, this kind of corridor between Orsha and Mogilev is pretty critical because somewhere in there is where the Germans are going to cross the river. Okay. So we're saving these for the combat phase. There'll be a combat here, but we can't do it in Overrun because of the swamp that they're in. So let's see what the is this unit reduced? It is not. All right, so we're going to try another hip shoot here, and we need to hip shoot this unit, this 161st Rifle Division, that's on the middle of that road, blocking the bridge that leads the Germans to Orsha. We need to DG that unit, so we're going to pull out a Ju-88 out of off map and hip shoot it. All right. So somebody give me. I guess let's run the numbers first. All right. Actually, hold on a second. 19 hexes to the map edge. Yeah. Okay, we're good. This is a Ju-87. It's got a range of only 49. We could see that it's less than 19 hexes to the map edge from this hex. And the airbase is the off-map airbase is 30 hexes from the map edge. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 hexes. So it is traveling 41 hexes to the airbase, which is within its 49. That's no problem. That is one-way air range, that number on the counter. So this unit is, if I'm not mistaken, in the open, all right? And it is 2 REs. So this is going to be a straight up roll on the barrage table, like with 12 barrage factors for the JU-87's 12 tactical strength. Okay. So somebody, Chet, go ahead and give me a 2d6 roll for the barrage. That is a 3. That is a failure. Now, another interesting, so all that means, because that didn't get intercepted, all that means is that the plane goes back to base and it needs to be refit. All right. We're going to try something different here. We're going to send another JU-87 at it. This is there's normally a rule that says you can only barrage or attack a given target once during a given turn, okay, or phase. There is flak. Well, let me get to that in a second. I'm kind of doing this in a deliberate way. We're also going to find that there's going to be an air intercept here. Hip shoots are an exception to that. I can keep allocating aircraft to hip shoots until I get the result I want, or I run out of airplanes. But again, you got to make decisions about that. Now, here's the target. This hex 1218 is the target. That is within the patrol range of the Soviet aircraft, active Soviet aircraft in Orsha. All right. So the Soviets can try to intercept that if they want. And frankly, if it's just a JU-87, then they're going to intercept that. So what I probably wished, and another thing though is that hip shoots are always one counter. Other types of air missions you could fly with up to 4 air counters. Hip shoots is always just one plane. Okay. So the Soviets are going to try and intercept that with this MiG-3. All right. Now what this is going to look like is an air-to-air combat. Okay. Air combat is on the first page. All the air stuff, in fact, is on the first page of the version 4.3 charts and tables. All right. There is a flak roll 2, and the flak roll is modified if it is in an enemy patrol zone. All right. Which it is in this case. The patrol zone is 10 hexes from an air unit. So what this means I really want to do is, before flying any of these hip shoots, I really need to take out this Soviet aircraft in Orsha. So what we're going to do there, we'll send this guy back for the time being. We're going to actually send this BF-109 to do a type of mission that we call a fighter sweep into the Soviet airbase in Orsha. All right. Now, so we've got 1 Soviet aircraft and 1 German aircraft coming in on the attack. Now, assuming the aircraft are active, and they are, which just means they haven't been used yet. All right. The convention here is that if the planes are active, meaning they're still like available to be used, that they are stacked in the stack on top of the airbase counter, regardless of where that airbase counter is in the stack. If they are inactive, meaning they have already been used or otherwise been sent to inactive for whatever reason, then they are stacked under the airbase counter. Okay. So if we fly this fighter sweep, BF-109, it's more than enough range, 44 range. We're going to fly this fighter sweep out to the base. At least 1 active aircraft needs to actually participate in the combat. And after that 1 round of combat, other units could abort if they wish. Okay. I could also run multiple fighter sweeps because it's not really a combat. I mean, it's an air combat. I could actually run multiple fighter sweeps against a single target too, or a single target airbase. But we're going to run a fighter sweep mission with the BF-109 against the MiG-3. All right. Now, the air-to-air value of the BF-109 is 4. For the MiG-3, it's 2. That is a differential of 2, which means that the attacking player is going to roll the dice. It's going to be a 2d6 roll, as most OCS rolls are. And they're going to add 2 because that's the differential. So I've rolled a 7. All right. We add 2 to that. We get a 9. Now, what that means is, and we needed to roll a kicker on that too, actually. That's again, that kicker is that third die. All right. So what that what that means is if I roll a 7, both planes abort. All right. If I roll less than 7, the attacker aborts. If I roll more than 7, the defender aborts. All that abort means is it goes down. All right. But then I'm going to roll that kicker die that's going to tell me if there's a loss or not. Now, in this case, I rolled a 5. On the kicker for air combat, 1 to 4 is no loss, and 5 to 6 is a loss. So what will happen then with this unit is it will flip to its lower strength side, and it will be shuttled down to under the airbase in Portia. There we go. That'll have to do. All right, so it's no longer active. So now there is not, unless I'm wrong here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Nope. There's not another Soviet air. I better check that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, there is. All right. So this BF 109 will actually go back to the off-map air bases into the inactive section. Okay. And we will fly another BF 109 on a fighter sweep down versus this Soviet fighter in Mogilev. All right. This is an actual fighter. So again, the German plane has 3 more air-to-air factors than the Soviet plane does. So that's going to translate to a +3 to the German roll. So we're going to roll 2d6. That's a 5 plus 3 is an 8, which means that the defender will go down. The loss die is a 2, which means there is no loss. All right. And there is actually a 2d6 plus 1d6 function in the module. So what that means is that the Soviet plane does not take a hit, but it does go underneath the airbase. There we go. That'll have to do. All right. And the German plane will go back to the off-map box. Actually, no, it flew in from over here, and that's fine. Back. No, the kicker applies. You always roll the kicker. But because it's possible for both players to take a hit. If both, so yes, actually, you're right. On a final result of 7, both players would abort, and if the kicker die indicates a loss, then they'll both take the loss. Now, I have been skipping flak here, so we're actually going to do that. You don't roll flak on fighter sweeps. That's why that wasn't important there. But now this Ju-87 has a clear path to try and hip shoot that 161st Rifle Division. So it's the same kind of barrage that we did before. However, there is a flak roll. All right. Now, the flak roll there's a table for this on page 1 of the charts and tables. So by all means, look at that if you want. However, the flak roll is you roll 2 dice. If the result is 11 or more, the air unit or group of air units takes a hit. All right. So that doesn't happen all that often. Went to roll 11 or better on 2d6, but there are modifiers, right? If there is an HQ or an airbase in the hex, those will be modifiers. An HQ will give you a +1. An airbase will give you a plus equal to the flak roll, equal to the level of the airbase. So if you got a level 3 airbase and an HQ in there, that's +4 to the roll. There's a really good chance that the incoming aircraft are going to take a hit. The hit will be applied randomly, by the way, to if there's more than one if there's more than one incoming air in the mission coming in. Hip shoots, however, are limited to 1 plane, so that's not a problem. That's never going to apply. With the mission is also no longer in an enemy patrol zone. So I'm going to roll 2d6. And I'll roll 1d6, okay? So we've rolled a 655. I'm going to interpret that as an 11 on the flak roll. There's no modifiers to it. So this unit will take a hit. So let's just flip it. Okay. And the third die is not really necessary if there's only one plane, because the third die in this case on a flak roll will tell you which plane in a flight of multiple aircraft will take the hit. It's not really necessary for hip shoots. We do still get the hip shoot. All right. However, we're down to 6 factors now, so that's going to be a substantially less attractive barrage. However, this particular target is in the open, so it does not get a modifier for terrain, and it's 2 REs, which means it doesn't get a modifier for unit density. So it is actually on the exact same column as the full strength barrage was last time. So Chet, give me a 2d6 roll. All right, so that is a 7. On the 5 to 7 column, I actually needed an 8 to successfully hip shoot that unit. All right, so this guy will go back. This JU-87 will fly back damaged to the off-map airbase. We're going to fly it in again. We're going to fly one more mission. It's going to be the same result. Chet, give me a 2d6 roll. This is the flak roll. 5 and 3 is an 8, which is no flak result. Roll 2. So now we're going to do the barrage. So go ahead and give me a 2d6 for the barrage. That is a 7. Once again, that is no effect, which means this guy will fly back to the inactive section. I feel like this is a critical hex. So what do we got? Do we got another one over here? This guy actually, this unit will actually be inactive now. This air unit, this BF-109. Let's try it one more time. Give me a flak roll. That's a 5, so there is no flak result. Give me the barrage roll. Need an 8 or better. That is a 9. That will DG this unit. So we'll go back to modes. Go to place DG. That's critical for this. This guy will fly back to inactive. All right, that's pretty critical for this particular unit. All right, so go ahead. It does. So those costs apply for artillery barrages, not air barrages. Air barrage, this is one of the big pieces of tension in OCS. Air barrages are not free because you have a limited number of aircraft, and you have to pay to refit those aircraft, but they're cheaper, generally speaking, than barraging with artillery. But take note of the bracketed numbers. Artillery are noticeably more likely to cause step losses than air barrages are. Air barrages are more likely, it's not impossible for you to do a hit, but they're more likely to just DG the unit. But that's really what we're after here, right? All right. So we have DG'd that unit. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing with 18th Panzer that we sort of did with 20th Panzer up here at the top. We are going to fuel it. I don't have to do it that way. We're going to fuel it, and the 47th Corps HQ will pull this supply point to fuel it. All right. We can make that decision in a minute here. All right. Now we're going to get our overrun in. So we are going to secondary roads in Smolensk are 1 movement point for tracked units. Okay. So here we got 1, 2, 3. Now you're going to be the Soviet unit is going to be at a strength of 6 here. This will be 14, which means I probably want to go with the entire division, to be completely honest about it. All right. So we're going to move with, there's nothing that requires me to move the units all at once. Okay. So I'm going to leave this unit back here, and we put the 2 tank brigades, the motorcycle cavalry, and the I'm gonna have to check that. Give me a second. That's a minor river. It's going to cost 4 for truck to cross that. I'm going to be able to do this on an overrun. I'm not sure that I am because of this river. Let me look at that real quick. Give me just a second. This is something I should know, but I'm probably a little rusty. So if this was going to be edited, I would. I still may be able to do it, but it's just going to be extra pain in the ass. Yeah. Okay. So we can't overrun over the bridge, but watch what we can do. Okay. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. We're pulling these units out. I'll leave the our infantry over here for the moment. So these are the units that are actually moving together. All right. So we're going to start here. We're going to go 1, 2, 3. Now, zones of control. There are zones of control in OCS. Zones of control don't matter unless you're retreating or your truck movement. We are not truck movement. So we have 16 movement points for these 3 units. So we're going to go again 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to cross the river for 4 for the hex, 5, 6, 7 for the minor river. It's an extra 3. All right. So we're up to 7 movement point cost. Just making a note of that here. So we have 9 points left. Now we are going to try to overrun this unit from the rear. All right. It's going to cost 3 movement points. So that's going to have spent 10. Now, we have to think about how we're getting supply there. Now, we don't have to. I think what we're going to do here is we're going to move this unit up to occupy that hex. And I'll explain why I'm doing that in a second. What I need is combat supply now. Combat supply. Disorganized units do not have Zocs, actually, Joe Press. Thank you for mentioning that. That is actually true. So that's actually true. So we actually don't need to do this. All right. So here's the HQ. That's where the HQ is coming from. The amount of SP that combat supply costs is 1 token per RE attacking. So this is going to cost 3 REs. We got to find those 3 REs from somewhere. We're going to take it from here. So we're going to go take this down to take that down to 1, and we'll take that to 1, and then that is our current, and that's going to be thrown from this headquarters. Now, let me put this back in. Actually, I think 7's probably fine. And we're going to actually mention a special rule for supply throw and trace. The adjacent is close enough rule. All right, so let me grab this KTX marker. So this headquarters has 7 throw range. So, and remember that on the secondary road, it's 1/2 per hex. So that's 1 movement point, 2 movement points, 3 movement points, 3.5 movement points. Now, this is if this unit were not disorganized, it would exert a Zoc into this hex, which means that the truck unit would have to stop unless there's already another unit there to block it. However, because it's disorganized, it actually doesn't exert a Zoc, so we can actually freely travel through that hex. Okay. Battalions do not count as half an RE for attack supply, as I recall. All right. So here's our what did we say? So from the HQ, The HQ's drawing supply from a couple hexes back. Remember, it has 5 movement points to do that with, truck movement points. And it's going to throw it forward 1, 2, 3, 3.5, 4. Now, it's only got 7, and it's +5 to cross the river. All right. So that's 12 movement points. It doesn't have truck movement points. It doesn't have 12 truck movement points of supply throw range. So, however, there's a rule in OCS for supply purposes that says adjacent is close enough. So all I have to do is get it adjacent to the hex that the combat is happening in. And I don't have to get it to the hex. So if I got it to this hex, it's actually adjacent to both the target hex and the hex that the attackers are coming in from. The combat actually takes place in the hex. Somebody get bumped. I think we're okay. So this is close enough. This is legitimate to get that supply from there. And I already marked it down. So we have combat supply. So this is going to be an overrun. All right. So we are going to have the Germans are going to have 8 factors. Remember, we're in move mode here. So our combat factors are roughly halved. Okay. And the Soviets are going to have 12, halved because they're DG'd to 6. All right. So right there, it's 8 to 6. That's a 1-to-1. All right. Now, there's another, let's say, very big deal here. One is terrain. We have to figure out what terrain we're in. Now, in this particular case, this unit is in dead nuts in the open. So there is not going to be a terrain consideration. Well, there is for this particular combat. So if we look at the combat table, which is page 3 of the V3 charts and tables folio, you're going to see that there's the top 4 rows at the top of that table reflect the type of terrain and the odds. So clear terrain is open terrain. So we are just going to use the lowest of those 4 rows. So that is actually going to say that is going to set our column as the 5th column from the left. Okay, at 1-to-1. However, there's an additional consideration. 2 additional considerations, really, and that is the action rating of the attacker and the action rating of the defender. Now, each participant in the combat will pick a lead unit that it is using to apply its action rating to the combat. This is the unit that will take the first loss if a loss happens. Okay. Now, in this case, we've got 3 German units, all of which have an AR of 5. So it doesn't really matter. The Soviet unit has an AR of 2, which for 1941 Soviet unit is really not that bad. However, it's disorganized, which means its AR is now a 1. So what that means is that there's an action rating differential of +4 in the Germans' favor. All right. The combat is 5 dice. I'll explain that in a second. The way it works is this. You're going to roll to determine whether or not there is surprise. You're going to roll to determine the effect of that surprise. And then after applying that, you're going to roll the actual combat result on the combat table. Now, the way we apply this in OCS, again, in practical terms, is that we roll 5 dice at a time. We roll typically 2 red dice. That's the combat result table die roll. We roll 2 whatever color dice. That is the surprise roll. And then we roll a single, these are all D6s, a single die of a 3rd color, and that is the surprise shifts dice. All right. Surprise is always a possibility in OCS. So Fog of War is basically 2 elements in this system. 1, you can't examine other people's stacks. 2, there's a surprise check. This is one of those weird things that doesn't feel like it'll work. But then you play it and it totally works. So there could always potentially be surprise. The attacker might be walking into an ambush. The defender might get caught completely flat-footed. You don't know until you roll the dice. Now, if the action rating is about the same, then the chances of surprise go down. But if there's a significant differential in action rating, then the chances of surprise go up. So Chet or somebody else, give me a 2d6 roll. This is the order in which we read these results. This is the surprise check. All right. The Germans have rolled a 7 for surprise, but their action rating differential is a 4, which means they add 4 to that roll. 7 plus 4 is 11. On an overrun attack, a result of 9 or more is surprise, benefiting the attacker. It is easier to get, because it's a mobile attack. It's easier to get surprise both ways on an overrun than it is on a regular attack. In this case, we've achieved surprise. So Chet, give me a 1d6 roll. So this is the surprise shifts roll. And this is exactly what it sounds like when I say it that way. This is 4 shifts in the defender's in the attacker's favor. All right. So that's going to move us again. If we look back at our combat results table, that's going to move us from the 1-to-1 column for open terrain all the way up to the 5-to-1 column for open terrain. All right. Furthermore, and this happens, what I'm about to tell you will take place whether there is surprise or not. Chet, give me a 2d6 roll. This is the actual combat result. All right. Chet has rolled a 5. However, the action rating differential is still a 4, and we will add that to this result. 5 plus 4 is a 9. So a 9. I'm gonna copy this and I'm gonna put it in. There we go. All right. So that is the combat table result. We see A01, E4, DL102. All right. Now, what does that cryptic stuff mean? All right. So first of all, it means that there's an attacker option. All right. I do have yellow armor attacking. That's absolutely true. So I actually did forget about that. Thank you, John Madison. All right. So what John's referring to in the YouTube chat is that because this is open terrain, yellow armor units are the units with a yellow symbol are armor units. These are doubled unless they are facing armor or anti-tank on the defender side, in which case they're only multiplied by time and a half. So this will actually be 6, 12, 14 to 6, which would actually be 2-to-1. Which will actually kick us up to 7-to-1 on the result, which would actually eliminate the attacker option, but that's okay. I like this result better because this will let me explain more. So the first thing that's going to happen is the defender will suffer a loss. All right. So we're first of all going to is there no, there we go. We're going to add a step loss marker. All right. Now, the defender will take its loss because there's a DL 102. So that means defender loses 1, but then 0-2. We'll get to the 0-2 in a minute. Now, the attacker, 0-1, that means the attacker has an option. Now, the attacker can, and the attacker will need to exercise their option before the defender exercises their option. Both sides will have an option with this result. Okay. So the attacker will now need to decide, how am I going to take that option? Am I going to take that option as a retreat or as a step loss? Here is the difference. If I take it as a retreat, then the defender no longer needs to exercise their option. It's just wiped out. If I take it as a step loss, then the defender must exercise their option. All right. So in this case, we are going to take it because the point is to clear this hex, and there's still one step there. So we got to get them out of there. So we are actually going to take the step loss, and we're going to lose these motorcycle units. And let's see, can I just send them to the dead pile? Send that to the dead pile. Right click to send to dead pile. Okay. All right. Now that means that the Soviets now need to exercise their option, and it's a DL 102. So they have two options that they have to exercise. They can take either or both of them as step losses or as retreats. Now, the if the Soviets take a step loss here, then the unit is dead. So that would be senseless. So clearly they're going to want to take it as a retreat. But and the other thing is that they actually can retreat out here because this unit is in move mode and does not exert a zone of control. So they actually can retreat. But they have to retreat 2 because it's an O2. So they'll retreat to here. So the Germans are reasonably happy. There was a costly attack over this the Drut River here. That they managed to cross the river at a ford and circle back behind the defending Soviet Rifle Division and displace them. And that has at least gotten the Soviets out of the way. Now, you'll recall that the Germans have only used 10 of their 16 movement points. Because it's an overrun, they do have to move into the hex that they overran into, but they have already paid the movement point cost for that hex. It cost 3. So they have 6 movement points left. So we are going to take 1/2 and we're going to try and overrun again. So that's going to take us to 10.5 plus 3 for the overrun. So it takes us to 13.5. Now we said I could only attack one target, but I can attack the same target multiple times. As long as I am doing it in an overrun. I could technically do it with different units too, but if I'm in that situation, then that's going to be very uncomfortable. All right, so we're going to have a very similar thing here. The Soviet unit is still DG'd. All right, so it's going to be, in addition to being down a step now, so it's halved for being down a step, and it's additionally halved for being DG'd. So now it's a strength of 3. And as we've discovered, this hex is still open terrain. So the armor, and that's all that's left, is going to be doubled. So it's going to be 12-3 or 4-1. So the Germans, you know what? They've paid to fuel these guys. They're totally going to do that. Now we do have to get them the 2 tokens for their combat supply. So let's 1, 2. It's going to be the same thing. Let's make sure we can get it there. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to get it to them. So we're good throwing it from 47th HQ. Now notice that 47th HQ here is in move mode. It probably does need to move up this turn. So I was comfortable leaving it there. Now the defender needed to spend supply there as well, I should point out. It costs 2 tokens for defender combat supply. Unless there's less than 1 RE in the hex defending. I can... There's a rule for internal stocks, but you can not use internal stocks if you can pull supply. So I think they had to, and if they fight on no supply, then they're halved again. So they're going to have to actually, we're going to just blow this whole one. Actually, no, that's not true. All right, so it's going to have cost us 2T to defend that infantry unit in the first hex. And it's going to cost us another 1T now because there's 1 RE left in the hex for defending combat supply. So, all right, so Chet or somebody, go ahead and use that 2d6 plus 1d6 roll. First 2 results will be the surprise roll, and the third die will be the shifts if necessary. All right, so just want to check this unit. Every once in a while, you will see units that have a different AR on their backsides. That's not, you don't see that in every single game, but you do sometimes see it. So still, the German action rating is a 5. Whichever unit leads, it's still a 5. The Soviet action rating is still a 1. So Chet rolled a 5. The action rating differential is 4. That's a 9. That is again attacker surprise. That is the what you need to roll on an overrun to get attacker surprise. And again, it is 4 columns. Now, in this case, we were 4 to 1, and we're going to shift up 4 columns. So we're now going to be on the 11 to 1 column under open terrain. Chet, give me a 2d6 roll. This is the combat result. That is an 11 plus 4, again, for the action rating differential, is a 15, which tops out the chart. So this is going to be an AE2 DL. Let me put this in the, I'll put this in the chat in Vassal. All right. So it's an AE2 DL203DG. So let's do the easy part first. DL2 means that the defender loses 2. The defender doesn't have 2. So the defender goes bye-bye. So let's take this guy and send him to the rifle divisions box. Delete this and delete this. And then we do have to move into that hex. All right. So now the rest of it. So that's, let me just walk through that. That DL203DG means the attacker loses 2, has 3 options, and then regardless of what happens at the end, is DG'd if they weren't already. They were already, so that wouldn't matter. So that potentially does as many as 5 hits, but it will be a rarity to actually absorb 5 hits in a single stack and a single attack in OCS. Usually you'll end up with a retreat. It depends, but it's rare that you'll get an attack that does that many hits. I won't say it won't happen. Now, the attacker result says AE2. That means attacker exploit. The 2 means it's the minimum action rating required to inherit the exploit from the combat result. However, this is an overrun. You cannot get an exploit result for an overrun. So that's it. Now, I will point out that the Germans have 2.5 movement points left. I will also point out that that is not enough to conduct another overrun attack on the 64th Soviet Rifle Division. Okay, so we won't be doing that. But we could still keep moving, right? And because this is armor and not trucks, zones of control don't mean anything to us. So what we are going to do is move. We got 13.5 is what we're at. We'll move 14.5, 15.5. Let the Soviets try to attack. That would be fine. Now, 18th Panzer. This is not required. However, I'm going to move these now so that we can. Otherwise, I'd be afraid that I'm missing units. In actual physical play, often what we will do, I've seen other people do it differently with KTX markers or beads or what have you. I will typically rotate the counters to indicate which counters I have moved and which counters I have not. So I'll like pick 2 orientations and I'll know based on the orientation of the counter whether I have moved it or not for this particular turn. I find that this method works for me. It is very tweezer intensive. If you're afraid of tweezers, you're going to have a bad time. But in Vassal, we don't need to do that because you got those little moved markers on the counters. So, all right. So the rest of 18th Panzer is going to move up. Do we wish to hip shoot? I would guess no, actually. So I think what we're going to do here is we're going to make our mode. I could do this because I haven't moved any of these units yet this turn. So I'm going to make my mode determination for these units. And I think I'm going to keep, we'll keep that way. And we'll keep this here. And we'll take this artillery unit and this infantry unit. And we'll move it up half 1. And their job is going to be to guard this position. Okay, to make sure that we don't have any Soviets sneaking around behind us. And then this other unit here, I think, is going to. We get 16 points. I don't need 16. 1, 2, 2.5. Yeah, we do need more points than that. I'm going to rejoin the rest of the unit up here. So we're going to go 1, 1.5, 2. 3, 4, 5. Now, there's a truck here. Okay. Now, the tricky thing is trucks are affected by zones of control. So I don't have the freedom to become adjacent to this Soviet rifle division without leaving an additional unit there, which I did not decide to do. Okay. So that's why I went around its zone of control. All right. So maybe I could do something with this, but I'd really have to hip shoot it. We do have the 29th Motorized Division here. Do we want to try to do that? What else do we have to hip shoot with? I'm not sure that's necessary. What we really need to do is get across the river. But what I am going to do, I'm going to show you how I calculate this first of all. All right, the supply. There's a stockpile of 4 supply here, but supply will come in on the map edge. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I'm going to count this again because in order to throw supply, I throw forward from the HQ, but I draw back from the HQ. So this needs to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Adjacent is close enough. Okay. So as long as my 5 truck movement points get me to adjacent to where the supply is, I can still pull from there. And now that HQ can throw 7 forward from where they are, which means, and you don't have to go in straight lines either, right? You can go in however you need to do it based on what your disposition looks like. There's no requirement, by the way, that I absolutely have to pull from the HQ. I could just pull from a supply dump, which is just units. It's just supply on the ground. So you don't have to do it from an HQ, but the HQ allows you could throw from the HQ, so you have a lot more range doing it from the HQ. We got to get an HQ near to or across the Dnieper somewhere in this area. And we don't know where that's going to happen at, but we know that it's going to have to happen. So we need to figure out what HQ that's going to be. It's probably going to be this HQ. All right. So let's see what we can do here. We unfortunately have a lot of swamps and fairly bullshittish terrain here. So we're not going to be able to we're not going to be able to overrun into that swamp. So we're going to unfortunately end up having to, let me explain this actually. So you notice that this is 10th Panzer. All right. I want to fuel 10th Panzer. It cost me a supply point. I flipped a marker over that indicates that all of 10th Panzer is fueled. There's nothing that says that I have to fuel it that way. Okay. I can not fuel it and just march these guys on foot. That's not a problem. I can totally do that. There is good reason to keep your multi-unit formations together or close to together, but that's not an absolute requirement. So we have a bit of a limited ability to do more hip shoots here. The way I see it, we have 2 more planes that are good at hip shoots, 2 planes that are less good at hip shoots, and about 4 or 5 planes that are no good at hip shoots, but they can still do it. So, but we got to force our way across here. So what this smells like to me is 10th Panzer moving up. How many let's see here. All right. So I think the logical step here is that we are going to activate this unit. This is Das Reich. And we have I shouldn't be able to see. I should only be able to see the top unit. So I can only see that there's a 12-2 there. And I don't know what it is. But I'm totally going to throw a hip shoot plane at that. Is there Soviet air in range? There is not. We already took that out. All right. So somebody, now, if it's German planes attacking, it should be a Soviet player rolling the flak roll. So Soviet player, give me a 2d6 flak roll. Go ahead and use the 2d6 plus 1d6. That's not necessary. 2d6 is good. Somebody joined as a Soviet player. All right, I'll do it. All right, that is a 5. That is no flak result. So we will now do the barrage. Now, the Soviet player is going to need to tell us if there's a column shift for unit density. All right, so let's look and see how that works. And again, all the air stuff is on the first page of the charts and tables. So the Soviets, the German player will not have access to this information. The Soviet player will just tell them whether there's a column shift or not. So we have two-step rifle divisions in this hex, but they're both down one step. So there's 2 REs in the hex. That is no modifier for unit density. However, the hex is a woods hex, which is close terrain in Smolensk, and that will give us a shift down 1 column for the terrain. So, Chet, give me a 2d6 roll for the barrage on the 8 to 11 column. That was your 8 on the 8 to 11. Will DG these units. So let's place DG. All right. And then this plane will go back to the off map inactive holding box. All right. So 24th Corps HQ is going to spend a supply point to fuel Das Reich. Das Reich is going to move up. We're going to need to be in move mode for this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So that works there. They're going to move up 1, 2. Remember, it's on a track. Now, in this case, we have Soviet units in a woods hex. The woods hex for truck units is 3 movement points. For track units, it's 2. Remember that is the limit. So I can overrun into this hex because the total cost of the hex to enter the hex for the movement class that the units there are is not more than 3. Remember, I can't use a bridge to decrease that cost for the purposes of that restriction. All right. So I started. Okay. All right. We started here. So we've moved 2, and we're going to overrun for 3. So they're going to have spent 5 movement points. Okay. Now, Soviet player is going to compute their strengths. They are going to be halved because they are a step down, and they are going to be halved again because they are DG. So the 11 unit will have to 5.5, and the 12 unit will have to 6, giving them 11.5, which will then have to 5 3/4. All right. Now I should mention that because this is actually it's not unique, but it's common among DNSig designs. The rounding rule is you keep fractions, and you use when you have to make an odds determination, you round normally. So if it's 0.5 or higher, you round up. If it's less than 0.5, you round down. So it's standard math rounding rather than the usual war game rounding, which is more often just drop fractions at the end. Okay. All right. So Soviet is 5.5. We could see. So this is not open terrain, and there's no armor here anyway, so it's kind of irrelevant. I could bring the artillery and the truck along as a tag along unit. That just means they're not going to contribute to the combat, but they will move with the rest of the formation. So we've got 12, 14. So we have 14. That sounds like a 2-to-1 in favor of the Germans, raw odds. However, Soviet action rating, they'll pick which unit they're going to that will lead the defense. There's no good reason for them to pick the 1. And remember, it's going to be down 1 more because of the DG. So they're going to pick the 2. So Soviet AR is going to be 1. German AR is going to be 5. So once again, that's going to be a +4 in favor of the Germans. Now, the Soviets need to either decide that they're going to defend without supply or they are going to spend defender combat supply. Because, so if we trace back, where's my KTX marker? If we trace back, remember, drawing supply is 5 truck movement points backwards. So 1, 2, 3, 3.5 to here in Mogilev. Now remember, adjacent is good enough, but it doesn't matter. So there is supply for them to draw from. All right. So they may not use internal stocks. Internal stocks basically means if you're isolated, you could go on internal stocks and then you could further be completely depleted from supply. Internal stocks don't come up that often because you can usually draw supply. So our two options here are either spend the supply, which we'll do, I think, or defend without supply, which means we're halved again. All right, which will move them down to 2.5, somewhere between 2.5 and somewhere between 2.5 and 3 versus 14. That's a calculator task, actually. It is kind of handy to have a calculator here. So 5.75 divided by 2 is 2.875 divided by 14 for the Germans. So that's 4 to 1. That's going to go to 4 to 1. So I could either let the Germans have the 4 to 1, or I can have them eat the 2 to 1. So I think what the Soviets actually do here is probably defend with no supply. Because at a -4 AR anyway, the chances of attack or surprise are really good. So, Chet, go ahead and give me the surprise roll, which is one of those 2d6 plus 1d6 rolls. Woohoo! Okay, so that's attacker surprise. Remember, we need a 9 or more on an overrun. So that's attacker surprise. You're gonna get 6 shifts out of it. So you're gonna go up from 4 to 1 all the way up past the end of the table. So you're gonna be rolling the combat result on the 13 to 1 column, which is 5 shifts up from where you're at. So give me a 2d6 for the combat result, and then we will add 4 to that because that's the AR differential. So that's a 5 plus a 4 is a 9. So the combat result is an AE3 DL2 O2DG. All right. So AE we ignore because it's an the attacker had to spend supply too. So the units that are attacking is actually 1, 2, 3, 4 units attacking. So that's a whole SP. So not forget to do that. You should technically spend the supply before you roll the dice. Because in the excitement of having rolled the dice and moving the units to advance after combat and all that stuff, it's easier to forget about spending the supply. So you should do that. I mean, the rules say this too, but you should do that before you roll the dice just so you won't forget about it. All right, so AE3, attack or exploit 3, it's an overrun. There is no exploit. DL2, O2DG. So the option is not going to matter because there's only 2 Soviet steps here, and they are both eliminated by the 2 losses. So we'll get rid of those, and then we will get rid of these. And then, because it's an overrun again, we are required to advance into the hex, but we have also already spent the points to advance into the hex. All right. So now we have spent 5 of the 16 points that are available in Das Reich. I actually need to put this, actually only 14 unless I want to leave the artillery behind. So we've spent 5, so let's spend 6 to move there. And then we're going to spend 7, 8. All right. And we're going to stop there. That probably indicates that our place we're going to try and cross the Dnieper is somewhere in here. You don't really want to cross along this bullshit. You could cross up here, or you could cross down here, or both is not a terrible idea. What did we say that was? 3, 4, 5, 6. Put them there. I think that positioning makes a little bit more sense. 6. Now I got to think about: am I in supply trace? Can I get supply from where I'm at here? I got to think about that. So, but I also need to think about moving an HQ up. And this is the HQ that needs to move up. So I'm going to flip it to move mode. Now, the HQ, you'll notice, is a truck movement. So it needs to fuel, actually, which means I forgot to spend the token up here. So all right. So from here, all right, we'll spend the HQ can fuel from wherever it can pull fuel from. So we'll pull fuel from here. We'll move it into move mode. That wasn't the right HQ. Hold on. I mean, I may move that one too. I don't know. That there. All right, that'll go there, and then this guy goes to move mode. All right. All right. So 16 truck. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Probably need to get some more units up there to help defend that, but the road is open. I don't foresee that that's going to be a problem. And I'll show you that in just a moment. Now, you as the player in OCS can decide what order your stuff moves in. That's not a problem. 1, 2, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5. We're a little out of range of that supply. So I got to figure out how that's going to happen. Two, three, four, five. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I could pull supply from here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 hex up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 hex back. All right, so this HQ is going to actually end up here. And the reason is we're not going to be able to reach this stuff, but this stuff's just going to get spent or trucked at some point. That's not going to be a real problem. But from here, if we trace back from that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we'll actually be here. That means I can pull from the map edge, which I want to do. Now I don't have to trace back to the map edge. Okay. at a point in the supply phase, we will determine the supply status of all of our units. Okay. And every unit has to either be in trace supply, or it's got to eat off the map, or it's potentially going to suffer from attrition. And the lower its AR, the more likely it is it will take step losses from attrition. Give me a second, Joe. Yeah, I'm not paying super close attention to the not paying super close attention to the YouTube chat at this point. Sorry about that. All right. So I want to be able to maintain distance from the map edge here. Okay. And then I got to figure out what to do with these. But fourth, what do we got here? Yeah, 4th Panzer is definitely going to attack. So let's do that now. So I'm going to spend. Let me show you how this works. So what is rail? Railroad is 1 for truck movement. So 4th Panzer needs to trace back, needs to pull 1 supply point. It's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's no problem. That's far enough. We're going to just spend that. We're going to fuel 4th Panzer. Remember, because I spent it to fuel the entire formation, it will be fueled for the entire time. I cannot overrun across this river. Yeah, let's move this back. Let's move this back and think this out a little better. All right. So let's this unit's in the open here. So let's put this unit in. Let's go with this guy. All right. So it's going to move 1 along the tracks. Then it's going to take 4 more. So that's 5. This ought to work out exactly. All right. Am I doing that right? So 1 for the tracks, and then 1 for the hex, and then 3 more. So 5 points. So this unit has spent 5 points. Okay. We're taking a bit of a chance not DGing that this unit first, but we're going to do it this way. And I can't overrun across that. However, I have 8 movement points, and I have it costs me 3 to overrun. So we're going to do an overrun here. Now I'll need to get supply to the unit. How am I doing that? This HQ can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it can throw to this hex. Adjacent is close enough, so that will be sufficient. So we will spend 1 token from wait a minute. 1, 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5. Yeah. All right. We'll spend 1 token for that. Soviets are probably not going to spend. Ooh. The Soviets actually can't. There's no reasonable way the Soviets can actually reach their supply source. Joe might be right about this, but I'm ignoring that for the time being. Neither hex is prohibited, though. So that's a rules nicety that I'm not going to look up right now. Let me put it that way. So we're going to make this attack. So it's looking like a 2-to-1, a base 2-to-1. We're in the open, however. So the attacker is and there's no anti-tank or tanks in the defending hex. So the attacker is doubled. So it's going to be 16-4 or 4-to-1 with an action rating differential of +4. Now, how I would say that when we're actually playing the physical pieces is we got a 4-to-1 up 4. So Chet, give me a 2d6 plus 1d6 for the surprise check. All right, so we got a 6 plus 4 on the surprise. That's a 10. That is attacker surprise for 4 columns. So we're going to go, and we're in the open. So from 4-to-1, we're going to go all the way to 11-to-1. So Chet, give me a 2d6 for the combat roll. That's a 6 plus 4 is a 10. That's going to take us to the 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to be 10. AE3, DL2, O2, DG. All right. So I'm going to once again put this in the Vassal chat just so everybody can see it. So AE3 we ignore because it's an overrun. Okay. The DL2 is more than enough to kill this unit. So we'll send this back to the dead pile, and then this unit must occupy the hex that it just overran into. Now we have cleared the road. Now the rest of these guys could move. All right, and that is all of this tank battalion's movement. All right, but these guys have not yet moved. Let's see what we're doing here. So we'll flip, flip, flip. That looks good. All right. So motorcycles, yes. Okay. So let's move these guys up. Tracks are railroads are 1 per, regardless of movement cost type. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's do an over. Let's mark that we spent 4 so far movement points. We're going to try and do an overrun on this unfortunate, very, very shabby Soviet rebel division. All right, so Germans have 12 points. The Soviets have 4 points. That is a 3-to-1. The Germans will use their 5 for the action rating differential. So that's going to give us a, what did I say? 12 to 4. So that's a 3 to 1 up 4. So Chet, give me a 2d6 plus 1d6. All right, that's a 7 plus 4 is an 11. That is is attacker surprise, but it is only one shift. That will shift us up to the 4 to 1 column. Chet, give me a 2d6 roll for the combat table. That is a 4. 4 plus 6 is 10, plus 4 for the action rating differential to give us a 14, which at a 4 to 1 is an AE3 DL202DG. Okay, so I'm not going to bother. It's the same result that we just got. The AE3 again is irrelevant because we're doing an overrun combat. There's no exploit. The Soviet Rebel Division will go away because we get at least 2 points. So this guy will move up, and then we will be at 4 movement points spent. And we need to decide where we're going to spend the rest of the movement points in this guy. I feel we got to spend supply for that, by the way. Where we started, we actually no, we couldn't. We're going to have to do it from here. Where do we do 3? Yep. So that'll wipe this out. And let's assume, because we didn't count it, we'll assume the Soviets spent the supply since it's right on the gates of Mogilev, right? Matt Van Wielden. No, this is just guys walking on the rail lines. That is why this does not represent, to my knowledge, this does not try to reflect actual rail movement. So that is a thing that you do have to think about in OCS, because we have what are called detrainable hexes. A detrainable hex is a city or town or whatever on a rail line that can also be a supply source. So Bobrusk down here is a town on a rail line, although it's a rail line to nowhere in the case of this game. So that's a detrainable hex. It is the detrainable hexes that you are doing your trace supply from. Ultimately, they don't have to be. Detrainable hex is connected to a friendly map base. Let me put it that way. All right, so let's. We've got quite a bit of movement left here. It feels like a wasted opportunity if we don't. But we're also not going to try to assault the city. Major rivers are probably not crossable. The Dnieper here is going to be a major river. Yeah, prohibited except for leg. So we can make use of that. We'll go here. And then they're done. Okay. So what's next? We are reasonably well positioned to getting across this river, but we also have to kind of defend this flank. So let's do that with the wagons. Interesting. Okay. Let's move this wagon. All right. Indeed, it is. Most German supply transportation was done by horses, not by trucks. So that is 100% historical. You will see more trucks. It depends on when the game is. Sometimes, like in a late war game, you'll see tons of Soviet trucks because they're all Fords and Studebakers. But you'll see a lot of wagons even for the Germans, even early in the war. Yes, and in some games you can eat them. In Burma, there might be an earlier OCS, like a very early OCS game where you can do this. But in Burma, you have these donkeys or mules or whatever they are, and you could totally either use them to transport supply or eat them as to eat off the map. So that is totally a thing you can do. These later games have other rules for that we're ignoring for the purposes of this demonstration. All right, so this starts in Bobrusk, but we got to get this. We got to get this supply somewhere more useful. So we're gonna go. It's leg. It's secondary road. So we're gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now I'm gonna stack this in a particular way because It costs 10% of the transport unit's movement points to load or unload. That costs 10 movement. There isn't enough to do that, so we will actually have to wait till next turn to load it, at which point I will put it under the wagon counter. Okay. We have first cavalry. Let's use this as an opportunity to explain a little bit about reserves. So, first cavalry is what it sounds like. It is 4 units, one of which is horse-drawn artillery. These guys will have move modes. You'll notice it's leg. On move side, it's still leg. That makes these guys really friggin' handy. All right. So here's the other thing. This is not a unit that requires fuel. All right. So I don't have to fuel this. This is leg movement. So, but I'm in reserve mode. All right. That's my mode. In reserve mode, I can do one of two things in the movement phase. I can either stay in reserve mode and move 1/4 my movement, or I could pull the reserve mode off and move my full movement. I'm going to move 1/4 of my movement, but I'm going to retain reserve capabilities. All right. So 1/4 of 12 is 3 movement points. 1, 2, 3. Boom. There we go. All right. So what else do we got to work with here? We've done this up here. I'm just going to mention, in case we don't get this far, that combats in the combat phase work exactly the same way that we've been seeing them. The only real difference is you can get exploit, and the range for surprise is a little harder to get surprise because you're deploying to attack them. All right, so we're going to do the same thing with 12th Panzer. Do we actually want to let's see here. Let's see where we start at. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think we pull reserve off of these guys. No, I think we don't, actually. I'm going to put this whole formation in move mode. We're going to fuel them. We're going to figure out where the fuel's coming from. Sounds like right here. Okay. And we're going to move this 1/4 of its movement, which is going to be 1/4 of 16 is 4 movement points. So we're going to move that 1, 2, 3, 4 right there. All right. This HQ obviously has to move forward. So we're going to do that as well, which means we're going to spend it. We're going to spend, you see some more wagons here. We may do something with those wagons. Let's flip this. Spend a token. All right. And we can move up to 16, but really that's probably something like this. Where's my KTX marker? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, it's going to be able to go one more here. So the stacking limit, by the way, is 10 regimental equivalents per hex. However, and if you're 10 hexes behind the lines, it doesn't really matter too much. You can go as high as 10 REs. If you're in the line and there's a chance that's any chance at all that hex is going to get barraged, do not stack 10 REs in a hex. You will be at a massive penalty on the barrage table. In this case, it doesn't matter. That's actually where I want that unit. I will, however, for mnemonic purposes, put the stack of reserve guys on top. In general, because you're not allowed to examine other people's stacks, it's easy to hide stuff in OCS, and I hide as much as possible. I hide supply, I hide headquarters, I hide reserves, I hide wagons, I hide extenders. And one of the reasons why I favor Smolensk as a vehicle for teaching people OCS is actually the fact that you need extenders. By turn 3 or 4, as the Germans, you want maybe 4. You want an extender down. You're going to need an extender on the other side of the Dnieper. Wherever you're going to cross, you're going to need an extender over here, so you can continue to throw supply, and that just creates a point from which you can throw supply further. Okay. All right. So we moved these. We do have this independent. Is this motorized on the back? Yep. Uh, yeah, we totally want to use that. I'm going to pay for that individually. So there's if a unit is not part of a multi-part formation, there are two ways to fuel it. One, it can be fueled by a fueled HQ. I can choose to fuel a headquarters, and then that headquarters can in turn fuel any independent units within its throw range. At the moment, there are very few independent German units on the map, so that doesn't really make much sense for me to do that, and it would cost a whole SP. All right, so we're gonna take this guy out, and we're gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where is he going? 6, 7. Yeah, I'm satisfied with that. We're gonna have to reduce Vitebsk here because maybe not. Maybe not. Let's rethink that. Yeah, Orsha's more important. We're gonna go a different direction. All right, so he's gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10, 10, 11, 12. Uh, that'll have to do. We'll have to be satisfied with that. Maybe we can leverage 29 to motorized here, which we haven't done anything with yet. Let's do that. Let's fuel 29 to motorized. All right, we're going to spend a token from here, and we're going to spend that and this from there to fuel 29 to motorized. We're going to flip it into move mode. The other like piece of wisdom here is if you've got an organic truck, which they do have one, you see this truck and it's going to be full. Don't use that supply unless you absolutely need to. Just don't use it to just randomly activate it. Use it for combat supply and defending, or if you're way out ahead of your own supply lines. All right. He's going to go 1. What's our limit here? 14? 14. 2, 1, 2, 3. Whoops. Damn it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to stay there. And we're probably going to be able to get a reasonably strong attack on this position. Orsha needs to be reduced. You have to take this because this rail line that runs through Orsha all the way to Smolensk and from there all the way to Moscow has to be taken. You have to take that rail line. So Orsha, you got to get Orsha surrounded as quickly as possible. All right, what else do we got in the back here? I think that's it. And this headquarters can reach this supply, so we're not leaving any supply on the table. 10th Panzer has not yet gone. So how are we doing that? Let's see. So let's fuel it. All right, and let's put it in move mode. All right, and we're going to pull these 3 units out here. Yeah, we cannot overrun into that swamp. So what we're going to do is we're not going to get very far anyway. So maybe I'll just actually put these guys in combat mode. Um, Minor River. Woods is 2 for track, plus 3 for the minor river. So that mean this would be 5. So we're going to go 5. And remember, there's a zone of control here, but these guys don't care because they're not truck. 5, 6. And I can't overrun into this hex because it's a swamp. It costs more than 3. So for that movement type. All right. And then these guys, this guy will go 1/2. Woods is 1 for truck for leg. So it's going to be 1/2. That's going to be 1.5 plus 1 for the river is 2.5. That is okay because he crossed it on foot. Um, and actually, the artillery can do that as well. So that's totally what we're doing. The truck cannot. So we're going to have to leave the truck back there for now. I guess I could put the truck. Truck is 3 movement points for wood. So we'll actually go. Actually, we could totally do this. So that's going to be 3 movement points, 4 movement points. And then into the woods hex and across the river is going to be 3 movement points for 7 plus 5 for crossing the river, the minor river. So they have 45 movement points. So we can totally keep that together. Keep the trucks with the unit wherever possible. All right, now we got this guy. This guy's actually going to just move up the road in a straightforward way. We'll save the supply. 1, 2, 3. Boom. There we go. And we'll look at. We're probably going to need to move this up too, aren't we? All right. So this guy will move up right there. That'll be fine for now. We could actually probably wait to do that, but the throw range should be about 8 points. This guy's not going to be in a supply problem. None of these guys are in a supply problem. Do I wait actually to move that up? I actually think I wait to move that up. So we're going to put this back. We're going to not spend that. And we're going to put that back there. We're going to wait to pull that up. This stack can pull its supply from this hex. Now, truck movement, again, 1, 2, 3, but adjacent is close enough. So getting to this hex is sufficient, even though this unit is throwing a Zoc. This guy can get his supply from down here. Okay. Anybody else to move in there? This guy. This guy actually does move up, though. There's no reason to keep him in the back. And we'll look at getting an attack in on this hex during the combat phase. All right, so we move them. 3rd Panzer can go, but 3rd Panzer doesn't have a ton to do right now because they are, unless they want to attack, I might as well move them up, right? Let's see here. So I could pull these out. I'm looking for a reason to not spend additional supply here, supply to activate 3rd Panzer. So we're not going to. Instead, we're going to activate the leg units and move them here. Okay. And we'll keep the truck with. I could fuel guys later in the. I could actually put a reserve marker on the rest of this unit. Not sure that would be worth my time. This swamp line here is really going to cause problems. So this would be 1, 2. We're actually going to move that 3 there, and watch this magical malarkey right here. So we got 3 units here. Let's see. All right. So in Bobrusk, I'm going to spend 2 SPs, and we are going to fuel 3rd Panzer. And now they have a truck with them. I can't just drive past that unit. But what I can do now is just drive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right there. And potentially that creates a blocking position here. And attacking across the river without infantry is not really going to happen, but hopefully we can take this hex and make that a moot point. Now, this reserve unit here will also be fueled. That's 10th motorized. You'll notice though that there's 4 units here. This is questionable whether it's, sometimes it might be worth it to spend the points individually. We'll put this unit in move mode, and we're going to get 3 movement points as 1/4 of our movement. Yes. So we'll move them up there and put them in a slightly better position to move forward. All right. I want to say that is all of the stuff. There's no reason for us to keep this truck right there. We move that truck right there. It's going to be 1, 2, 2.5 to get it to the map edge. There might be another truck here somewhere. That might have been the truck I was thinking of. I think I moved everybody. Which fuel? Which fuel do you mean? You mean the fuel that I have already allocated to the formations, or the? No, I have not. And you don't lose it. It does. Whatever you do not use piles up. So, and in fact, in fact, knowing to what extent you want to build the fuel stocks in a given turn is kind of a key piece of information, a key decision that you need to make in OCS. You need to. There are turns when you will want to attack, and spend all the points, and other turns where you will want to attack spend as little as you can. But remember, for any unit that requires fuel, which is basically anybody that's not hoofing it, you got to spend points just to move them. Now, a trick is that you do not have to fuel the unit to advance it after combat. That is a trick, but you're only going to get 1 hex out of that. So we're going to call this the end of the movement phase. Now, there's a couple other things we want to do here. One of those things is to fly air barrage missions. Now, these are different from hip shoots in that the Soviets could do this too if they have the aircraft, which they don't. And I could fly more than one plane, but I can also only target a hex once. So what we're going to do is the hex we're going to target here is 1305. That's this hex crossing the river. And we're throwing these 2 Durnit 17s after them. So that's going to be 16 points. Does that make it good? Let's see. It's not great. I'm going to throw in a BF 110 along with it. So that's going to be 3 aircraft. So the Soviet player is going to roll flak. And because there's 3 or more planes in the incoming mission, there will be a +1. So somebody go ahead and give me the flak roll. Okay. That's a 6 +1 is a 7. That is no flak result. All right. So we're going to have 16 + 5 is 21 barrage points coming in. So Chet, give me a 2d6 + 1d6 for the barrage roll. All right. That is a giant 2. We'd be rolling on the 17 to 24 table. You only need a 5. Unfortunately, that's not even a 5. That is a shit sandwich. And because it's a regular barrage, we can't barrage that hex again with this phase. Okay. So where else do we want to hit? I think we want to throw some points at that. So let's do that. It's going to be bad terrain. Let's throw the aircraft over here. Actually, this is more important. All right. So we're going to throw 2 aircraft at this Soviet unit in 1519. So give me the flak roll. It's 2 aircraft coming in. So there is no +1. Is that a 7? All right. So for flak, you should actually for flak, if there's more than one aircraft coming in, you should actually roll 3 dice. But there's no result here because the third die will tell us what plane takes the hit. So we do not take the hit here. So that's 17 factors coming in into open terrain, right? Right. So go ahead and give me the 2d6 plus 1d6 for the actual barrage. That's a 10 plus 4. All right. So this is 17 factors, and a 10 is a 1/2. All right. You got a 4, which is unfortunately not a 5 or higher, so you don't do a hit, but you do DG this unit, which is important. All right. So these planes will fly back to the inactive area. There's not a ton more to work with here. Let's see if that's actually to what extent that is true. No, that's bullshit. Let's see. I think that's basically all the Germans want to do. All right. So next time we go, we will go Mark G. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. That will help a lot. The support is greatly appreciated. And if you're buying anything, buy it from Rebel Knight. Use the link in the video description, the affiliate link. I'll get a little bit of kickback. All right. So next is going to be the Soviet. So we have to check supply now. Okay. Now I am reasonably confident that everybody's going to be fine, but let's check that. All right. Yeah, let's check that. All right. So what about these guys up here? 20th Panzer is kind of up on the edge. So what I need to do, I'm going to pull this HQ out and put it on top now. All right. Because this is the HQ that's critical up here. So the HQ needs to reach back either to the friendly map edge or to a friendly detrainable hex. Now, the town of Leppel here is a detrainable hex, but we do not control it for this purpose because that rail line doesn't go anywhere. It goes back to Orsha, which is still Soviet controlled. So we cannot count that as a detrainable hex. So we have to count the map edge. So tracing back to the map edge, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Adjacent is close enough. Okay. So the HQ, and by extension, the units with the HQ, are fine for trace supply. 20th motorized is going to be 1.5 truck movement points away. It is doing great. 7th Panzer. Did we move 7th Panzer? We did not move 7th Panzer. And if we didn't move 7th Panzer, then we're going to put a reserve marker on it. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 points from this HQ. So it is fine. But what about these guys up here? This might be a problem. So here we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So our 7 runs all the way up to this unit. So both of these stacks are tracing supply to this headquarters, which can in turn trace back to the map edge. All right. So everybody north of here is doing great. 17th Panzer is probably where is it tracing from? Good question. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yes. So 17th Panzer is also tracing from 39th Corps up here. Everybody on this central corridor is going to definitely be fine since wait a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. All right. So 47th Corps could trace back to the map edge. Adjacent is close enough. And it can throw forward to this unit, this stack, and this stack. These guys up here, we've already looked at their supply situation. This stack is pulling from 24th Corps. The IRGD and the 10th Pan, the rest of 10th Pans are getting thrown supply from 46th Corps HQ. Everybody down here is coming out of 24th Corps HQ, and it can trace 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It can trace back to Bobrusk. It could actually be a little farther forward than it is because adjacent is close enough. But Bobrusk is a detrainable hex that with a rail line running out of it that runs back to my map edge. So I could trace back to Bobrusk, and that's not a problem. Okay. Now, if I could take Mogilev, I need to convert the rail line, so that's a factor. But because this is East Front and the Soviet rail gauge is different, so I'd have to convert the rail lines to make Mogilev a like legitimate to trainable hex for the Germans. But that is a thing you can do, and you do get some rail repair units relatively early in the game. All right, this guy right here, is he in trouble? Is that a problem? All right, so this can go one half, two, three, four, five, six, seven. This guy might be. He could trace to the map edge. This is considered a German entry hex, so I think that is. I think it's okay that this unit right here. This is 10th motorized can trace back to entry zone F, and I believe that is okay. And then whoever this is first cab. This guy's okay as well. So next, we're going to move to the Soviet reaction phase. Now, there's a couple of things that you can do in your reaction phase. One of those things is fly air missions. Now, I gotta have to check the rules on this because in a lot of East Front OCS games, and particularly early war ones, the Soviets are pretty limited in what they can fly. And in fact, we do have a rule for that in Smolensk. The Soviet player cannot fly missions in reaction. All right. So normally that's something you could do is you could fly air reaction missions and maybe try and disrupt enemy attacks. The Soviets are not going to be able to do that here. The Soviets also don't have anybody in reserve. So let me look at the offboard. Looking at the offboard stuff here real quick. Yeah, the Soviets don't have any reserve markers. So that's what I thought. So they don't have any reserves. That's something they could normally do in this phase, but they cannot do that in this phase. So we will go to the combat phase, the German combat phase. All right, and we're going to get a couple of combats here. Let's try this one right here. This is the city of Bakov. All right. Now, this is going to be a terrain wise. This is going to be what? A town? I think that's considered a town. No, that's a village. Yeah, that's a village. All right. So we're going to have a 14 German factors attacking 5 Soviet factors, which is going to round up to 3-1. Okay. So we're going to have a 3-1. Soviet AR is a 4, which is very high here. So it's looking like a 3-1 plus 1. Everybody's got to spend supply. So can this guy get supply from where he is? So the bad news is that this 3rd Panzer has units that are not in move mode, which means that they are exerting a zone of control into this hex, which means that they can't trace that back, which means we'd have to basically pull it out of, we could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, we could pull it. So we will in fact spend, and it's only 1 RE, so it's only 1 T. So Soviets will spend it. It would be nice if the Soviets could hold here. This is the least favorable attack that the Germans have done. So let's pull up the chart, and we're going to get a 3-1 up 1. But the terrain is going to be very close. So this is not going to be a great column. So Chet, give me a 2d6 plus 1d6 for surprise. It's plus 1 to the roll. All right, so that is an 8. Plus 1 is a 9, but on a regular attack and not an overrun, 10 is what you need for surprise. So there is no surprise. We still get a +1 on the combat roll. So we're at 3-1 on very close. Chet, give me a 2d6 roll. That is a 9, +1 is a 10. So what we have here is an AO1, DO1. So AO1, DO1, both players have an option. You do the losses first, then you do the options. But the attacker has to decide, oh, this was not a +1. Well, okay, so it wouldn't have made a difference. There were actually, all the units are 4s. There is no action rating differential. That would not have made a difference to the surprise roll, but it might make a difference. It actually doesn't make a difference to the combat result either. It's still AO1, DO1. So the attacker has to pick first. Do they take the loss or do they retreat? In this case, it's a tough choice, right? Does the German player take the loss? The German player has to spend supply for this, which we'll do in a second. I'll do it right here. I'd rather not forget. Good habits include aggressive SP accounting in OCS. I think we actually take the retreat here. I think we just back off. This hex, it's if you were like forcing the river crossing here, I think that would be a little different because then you could drive this reserve motorized division over the river. I think that might be much more useful, but it's not. So we wouldn't be able to cross there anyway. So I think it's okay. I think this is not a real attack. There's no attacks down here. Does 4th Panzer charge into the city of Mogilev? I'd say no, not in combat mode. That is a city, so that is very close terrain. I actually think I got that terrain. No, it's this is a village, but it's also swamp. Swamp is very close. Now this down here, this is a bit different. Let's do this combat. Do we want to do this combat? No, not really. All right, so this one in the spiky oval here, that means that this is in a hedgehog. This is a sort of field works that's recognized in OCS that will add to its AR for surprise purposes and combat DRM purposes. So it's not as I'm oversimplifying, and you actually have to read the rule because it's a little bit tricky. But fundamentally, what that probably means at the end of the day is that this unit acts like an AR3 unit because of the hedgehog. Okay. But this DG unit, on the other hand, is totally getting attacked. So we're going to have quite a bit here. So no armor, unfortunately. We're going to have 10 points coming in from that hex and 5 points coming in from there. So that's 15 points. That is a total of 4 attacking units, which means we're going to have to spend an entire SP. That'll come. This HQ will throw it, and it will come from here. 15 to 5.5. That's going to work out to be a 3-1. Up 5. Okay. So Soviet player just needs to decide whether they're going to get supply or not. So the defender combat supply is 2T unless there's only 1 RE in the defending hex, and then it's 1T. The Soviet player actually doesn't have enough supply. Or do they? They totally do. Okay, so they're going to have to, they either have to decide if they have it available, if they have supply available, they have to either use the supply or defend at half. I don't think they defend at half. On the other hand, it's a 3-1 plus 5. So maybe they just defend at half. Screw it. Let's do it that way. So that means that we're at 11, 5.5, 2 3/4. So 2 3/4 to 15 is 5-1, up 5. Chet, give me a 2d6 plus 1d6. All right. That's a 5 and a 2, which is 7, plus 5 is a 12. That is surprise. That is 6 columns to the right for attacker surprise. So we started at 5-1, and we are in the open. So that's going to take us all the way up to the maximum column. Chet, give me a 2d6 roll. +5. Jesus Christ. Okay. So +5. Um, +5. It takes us all the way to the top. So this is an 8. Let's actually look at this. All right. Here is the combat result. AE2 deal 203 DG. All right. So we have 2 defending steps here, but it's DL2. So they're just dead. All right. Now, AE2, we're in the regular combat phase. So now we can actually put ourselves in exploit mode. We can, first of all, advance everybody that fought in the combat. And I can bring, as tag-alongs, I can bring the artillery and the truck with me because they're part of the same division. And let's add exploit. So, oops, look at that. That's too many markers. All right, so when it says AE2, what that means is that any unit in the attacking stack that's eligible for exploit and that has a AR of at least that number is now in exploit. Okay, so that means that the artillery and the truck are not in exploit, but the combat units are. Okay, because they actually didn't participate in the combat. So I'd have to leave some guys behind if we're going to actually exploit with that. But we'll see. Okay, so we got one more here. We are probably not getting to the Soviet turn because we've been at this 3 hours already. So I am probably going to wrap up. So Joe Perez asks if there's a funky rule that says that a defender chooses the one terrain feature hex or hex size for each enemy stack as to what terrain affects. I'd have to look that up. The defender does choose the defensive terrain, though. I can tell you that. All right, so this hex right here, we've got 14 attacking factors going into the swamp, which is very close, versus the 12 strength Soviet rival division, halved for being down a step or half its steps, and halved again for being DG. So we got a 14-3, which is 5-1. So we got a 5-1. And AR here is going to be 4 attacker going in with 4, defender defending with 1. So that is a 5-1 +3. So let's spend the supply. Defender supplies defending with only 1. Step, so it only costs 1 T to defend. Okay. Bad form to keep your supply on top of the stacks. An attacker supply will cost 2. So we'll just wipe that 2T out. I usually drag the spent supply points off the edge of the map, so they're not on a map hex so I can recognize that they're not in play. But I invariably need extra supply tokens, so this way I can just drag them back on. All right, so we got a 5-1 +3. So Chet, give me a 2d6 + 1d6 for the surprise check. That is a 2-2-2. All right, so 4 + 3 is a 7, so that is no surprise. We are at 5-1, and we're in very close. Now you'll notice that there is the very close comes from the swamp, by the way. So this is not an incredibly advantageous column, but we do get a +3 to the roll. So Chet, give me a 2d6 roll for the combat result. That is an 8 + 3 is 11. You'll notice that under very close, there is no 5-1 column. It's 4-1 straight to 6-1. So we're doing this on the 4-1. So we said 8 + 3 is 11. So that is going to be an A01 DL101. All right. So we apply the loss first. That means that this loss goes away. Delete that. All right. And then these guys are going to move up. But they do have a attacker option, and because the defenders were wiped out, I think I don't have to take the attacker option. So that is all the attacks, however. So let's see what else we're doing. Because now we have all kinds of interesting things, decisions that we have to make. Notice, however, that we have already checked for supply, and we do not need to check it again until our next supply phase in the German turn, not the Soviet turn. Soviets will check their own supply in their supply phase. So I can now run units out of supply if I wish. So after combat, we do the exploit phase. This is where we do exploit. Now, if you are doing, let's do the exploit units first, because we have some units that are actually exploiting. Exploiting units can move half their movement factors. Okay. So we're going to move these guys up. We're going to probably keep this guy in the back for now to guard the trucks and the artillery, because we can't move those up. Let's move this up, exploit 1. Let's move these up, because we're going to have to, we like I said, we got to reduce that position. And that's the exploit right. That's the exploit right there. That leaves the artillery is combat strength of 1 by itself. So not super, and it's be halved if it's in move mode. So you don't want to leave artillery by itself. All right. So next, I think we didn't move 17th Panzer, but that's okay. We will have saved the points. All right. And I'll also point out that 29th Motorized is still fueled because we paid to fuel the entire formation. Same thing is going to apply to 7th Panzer, which is, I recall, moved. Actually, I think it was pretty this far forward to begin with. Now, a unit in reserve moving in exploit can move its full movement. Okay. That will technically remove the reserve marker. I'm calling up the reserves. Okay. However, I'm not actually going to move very far here. I think we're just going to move to here. I didn't pay to move that. Actually, I didn't pay to fuel that. That's going to have to stay where it is. We'll keep the reserve on there. Okay. 20th Motorized. We also did not move up. So they're done. Somebody else was in reserve. This guy's in reserve. All right. So we'll pull the reserve marker off. 12th Panzer is fueled. How are we doing it? Yeah, let's try and circle around Vitebsk. This is the keyhole right here, that hex. So we're moving how much? Up to 16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's as far as it's going to go. This guy in reserve will let's see here. Yeah, probably what we're doing here is just going to do something like. So there's a couple things I could do. Gorodok here has a Soviet HQ. It'd be nice to knock that out. I don't know what else is in there. Knocking it out would basically mean cutting its supply from the north here. I think that's something that we maybe try to do. Right now, it would be pulling supply from inside Vitebsk. So we're going to break this unit up. We are going to. It can also trace around though, and we're in move mode, so we're not going to get a lot of. We'd actually have to. Let's see how we would do this. All right. So let's try it this way. Let's pull this guy, and he's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This guy is going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This guy will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Pioneers were actually in this hex, as I recall. So they're not in reserve mode. I pull this reserve marker off here too. Yeah, we're just putting these guys right here. Oops. All right. So at least make the Soviet player work to get to that map edge a little bit, at least. All right. What else do we have here? Do we have any other reserves? I believe we have this cavalry unit in reserve. Um, we're totally going to activate this. And again, cavalry's awesome because I don't have to pay to fuel it. It's got 12 movement points, and its 12 movement points are going to go. What is the swap? Is 3. Okay. Yeah, I see exactly what we're doing. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, put that cavalry unit there. That gives us the ability to cross this major river on foot, get this guy out of the way, and make some magic happen, and then get this HQ up. So HQs have engineering capabilities. Okay, that includes there are a couple of OCS games that have engineers, but most OCS games do not have engineers. The HQs have the engineers as part of the HQ. So the I need to get this eight. Let's pull an HQ randomly since we're basically done here. So if anybody has questions, either in the Discord that are participants in the event or in the YouTube channel, let me know. Because we're not going to get the whole Soviet turn. So I'm going to like put this guy here just to illustrate this point. This is a headquarters in move mode. All right. Can't do engineering stuff when it's in move mode, but if it's in combat mode, it can bridge. That is one of the engineering functions, which basically means that this acts, whatever hex side I'm looking at, acts as though there's a bridge across the river. That's critically important for the Dnieper here. I have to get a bridge. I have to get troops across this river so that they can continue to push forward and isolate, cut Orsha off so that it is dependent, it's going to have to starve those guys out. Or and then after that, I'm going to need an extender out here somewhere, right? By about the second turn, the Germans need to know where their extender is going to go. That first extender. All right, so I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and so hopefully this has been useful to people who kind of wanted a sense of OCS and how it plays. Do we have any questions from anybody that is watching? The only units that can exploit are units that are in exploit mode, or you can release reserves. Does that answer the question? The only way to get exploit mode is to get that result on the combat table. Reserve mode, however, assuming you remember you have a fixed number of reserve markers available that is set by the scenario and or the order of arrival. So assuming you have a reserve marker available, you can assign reserve mode in mode determination, which you do at the beginning of that unit's movement or at some point in the movement phase if it's not moving. Okay. Hopefully that explains it better. I don't feel like I'm being incredibly articulate here tonight. So, all right. So this is the particular game here. The turns tend to go pretty quick because while the density is not super low, there's not really that many units to have to manage. So you can get a lot of play. You could play this whole thing in a weekend. All right. Other questions? Any questions in the Discord? Let's check that. All right. I do not see any questions in the Discord. Any other questions from YouTube? Jesse or Chet, do you have any other questions? I think that is a fair statement. Um, so bear in mind that, for example, the Germans are going to get somewhere between 3 and 11 supply points per turn that will show up on the map edge. Now, they have a couple of wagons. Now, on the map edge, great, you got supply, but I mean, maybe that's out of reach, right? You can't just like let it sit on the map edge forever, or you won't be able to advance very far. You got to get that supply forward. So you do start with some wagons where you can move it with. Okay. Furthermore, you will also get rail conversion or rail repair units that could be used to convert the rail lines from the from the Soviet gauge to the German gauge. So let's say you can take Vitebsk here. Remember that you control this map edge. So if you could take Orsha is the better example, right? You take Orsha, you can run 3 hexes per turn. You can run rail repair units out here, and then once you've converted the rail all the way to Orsha, Orsha isn't, and you control, all the rail hexes leading to it and Orsha. Orsha is a detrainable hex, which means you can rail supply there. Right now, you can only like rail stuff from this either supply points or units from detrainable hex to detrainable hex. That's not really an option for the Germans at the beginning of the game because they don't really have. There's not really much to detrain to, right? The detrainable hex down here is Bobrusk, but you've already got a bunch of stuff there, and the rail line through Bobrusk doesn't go anywhere. So you got to take like Mogilev. So rail lines at roads too, but rail lines become absolutely critical for your ability to project supply forward. Because once you could, let's say, it's turn 6 or whatever, and the Germans control Orsha and have converted the rail line up to Orsha, then they can start, and it's a double rail line. That means that stuff rails at half cost. So you could like be railing. What is the German rail cap? Hold on, I'll tell you. German rail cap in this scenario. It's 0 at the start, but it will increase as the campaign goes on. And let's say you have a 3 rail capacity, you could just like send 6 supply points to that detrainable hex. Let alone if you could project all the way down to Krasny or Smolensk or something like that, right? So those it does. This is one of the reasons I really like OCS is it is a lot of dots to connect. But you also have a lot of different tools to use to connect those dots, right? To put that puzzle together for yourself. Between HQs and supply transport, meaning trucks or wagons, or sometimes mules or whatever. There's a couple of games that have mules or whatever. You can actually air transport supply. But you also have to kind of plan that from time to time, you're going to need to take a couple turns off and do very little while you build up supply for the next big push, right? One of the interesting things about Smolensk is because it is a relatively short game in terms of number of turns. It doesn't sound like it. It's like 27 turns, but that's not too long, right? You're going to have a lull or two in there, but mostly things keep moving in Smolensk. In a larger game, not necessarily larger in terms of map size, but in terms of time frame, you may have to spend 4-6 turns just sitting there building up supply. And there's a rule for simulcast turns when that happens, when both players want to do that. So, but yeah, you absolutely have to plan your way through that. That is the puzzle like nature, which I guess some people might call a chess like nature. I don't like to use that term for this, but that's one of the things I really like about OCS is it makes me think about that stuff, and that I am forced to make decisions every turn. You know, so for example, we had these 2 infantry units that attacked this unit in the swamp holding the bridge here at Bakov. Was I gonna I could have forced the Soviets to retreat, right? Or take the step loss. It was a AO1 DO1. So I had to decide, how bad do I want that hex, right? And that's going to happen. You're going to have to make decisions like that relatively early in this game because you're going to have these urban centers, right? You've got Mogliev, you've got Orsha, you've got Vitebsk. Vitebsk is a little less important, but sometime in the first 2 turns, you're going to be attacking Mogliev and Orsha, maybe both. And you're going to start have to make decisions about what you're going to lose and what you're not going to lose, right? And the Soviets, let me zoom in here. I caught Grant from the Players Aid pants down on this. He didn't know, so this was not a big win over him. But in the demo game that we did at BGF a couple of years ago, he pounded on this for like 3 turns, and that 4 AR NKVD unit basically caused that hex to continue holding on for like 3 turns. So you don't know how long it's going to take you to reduce those. So you have to plan on both reducing these interesting points and bypassing them if necessary. That's why you need, because you've got to be able to get troops back here, right? Back here behind the Dnieper, which means you have to be able to project supply behind the Dnieper. And that's why you have to get a bridge. If it's Mogliev or Orsha in the first 2 turns, great, but you've got to have basically perfect execution to make that happen. So you really need to get an HQ up there to try and cross for you. And looking at the, so one of the interesting, when you get an OCS game, the first thing to do is to just look at the game specific rules. It's going to tell you, okay, where are the supply sources? There's always supply sources. Maybe it's specific rail lines or specific cities or the map edge or whatever. The game will tell you that. The game will tell you if there's any special rules for air attacks, like can you hip shoot? Unless it says you can, you cannot. It's going to tell you any other special rules. There's not that many other special rules here in Smolensk. It's going to tell you how, what the terrain is and what the effects of that terrain is. You start looking at the maps and you start looking at the order of arrival and you start to play these games more. You get a sense of what's coming in and what you have to accomplish in a specific time frame. I've played the opening of Smolensk enough. It's been a couple of years, but it's been about 2 or 3 years actually. But I've played it enough that the Germans have to make very strong progress on the first couple of turns, and they did okay here. So, well, here's the thing: in OCS in general, the Germans will tend to do more overrun combats than the other side. That's less true in the West Front games, but it's still probably happens because they tend to have more units that with a lot of movement points because they got a lot of like tanks and stuff. And also because their action ratings are higher. And remember, the chance of surprise is 1 higher in an overrun combat than it is in a standard combat. And the chance, if that action rating differential is the single biggest factor, right? If you could get a +2 action rating differential, and a lot of you saw what the action rating differentials are here. Admittedly, we're not talking about the cream of the Red Army here in July of 1941, okay? But there are some tough units. You're generally looking at an action rating differential of at least 2 and more likely 3 or 4, all right? And in that scenario, there's no reason not to overrun if you can overrun, because you stand an excellent chance of getting a significant shift. The odds are less important than you saw me take 1-to-1 attacks, 1-to-1 up 4. I'll take a 1-to-1 up 4 any day. Because you're almost certainly going to get, if you roll, what is it, on an overrun, if you roll 5 or higher, you're going to get attacker surprise. Right? Now, I will roll defender surprise because it's a talent. But all right. This is true. So just from the YouTube chat here, Joe Perez points out that HQs in combat mode on a rail line make that hex detrainable, and that can be a factor too. And that might end up being a factor here as well, especially on this rail line to Orsha, that it might end up being significant. Westlay asks, do multi-unit formations need to get their supply from the same source or get a penalty? There's no penalty, but they should all be supplied from the same place. But unless you have broken the units up, that's not generally a problem. Technically, they don't need to be. It's only an issue. Let me start this explanation over. The answer is no, they do not all need to be supplied from the same source. However, if you fuel the whole multi-unit formation spending 1 SP, then the source of the supply has to be within range of all the units that are going to take advantage of that multi-unit formation being fueled. So if you have like your 21st Panzer or whatever it is spread way out all over the place, then it's going to be a problem. And Joe mentions that action rating ends up being the most important number on the counter. And that's true. I mean, the combat factor is certainly a factor. The movement factor is certainly a factor, but action rating is really important. Now, as you get later in the war, even on the East Front, you start to see, I mean, honestly, it's the Red Army, right? You still got a lot of not awesome troops, but you'll start to see more Soviet 3s and 4s and sometimes even 5s. You'll start to see better Soviet aircraft, like a lot better Soviet aircraft. You'll start seeing Soviets with the ability to hip shoot, at least with some planes. That's not uncommon. You sometimes see an OCS game where it says something like the Germans can hip shoot, but like only with Ju-87s or something like that. So there's like a significant field difference between like the OCS East Front games that take place in 41 versus the OCS East Front games that take place in 44 and 45. Those feel hugely different to me. But at the same time, both sides will have interesting decisions to make, right? The Soviets have to decide, hey, how strongly am I going to try and hold Orsha, right? How strongly am I going to try to hold Mogliev? To what extent can I like absorb losses, right? As much as the stereotype is that the Soviets can afford to absorb an infinite amount of losses, that's not true. You'll generally be happy to take exchanges, right? If it costs the Germans a step, the Soviet replacement rate is higher. But in the context of one of these games, the game might not last long enough for you to really take advantage of that. So you can't just afford to just throw men into the wood chipper all day long. You've got to try to preserve what forces you can. Particularly a good unit like this Soviet First Motorized, right? They're pulling the fuck out of there in the first turn. You're going to keep them. They're an okay Soviet unit. They have significant capabilities. I would 100%. I'd want to keep somebody in that hex because it's a hedgehog hex. It's a free fortification. But I would 100% pull that First Motorized out of there. And there's a couple other Soviet multi-step formations in the game as well. There's also you'll notice like on the east side of the map, there's a bunch of hexes with hedgehog symbols in them too. And those represent like pre-built defensive lines that the Soviets can occupy in front of Vyazma, for example. All right. Any other questions? I'm going to wrap this up otherwise. All right. So hopefully we have not encountered any huge technical glitches. I know there was some resolution problems earlier. I do want to thank everybody for watching, and I hope that everybody is going to continue to have a fabulous time at the rest of the Armchair Dragoons digital convention. If you'd like to throw some love my way, the best way to do that right now is to go to the Noble Knight affiliate link in the video description, because my goal is to get myself a copy of Campaign for North Africa. We've got quite a ways to go. So buy some stuff and I get a little bit of a kickback from Noble Knight in the form of store credit. And that'll help me get to that goal. So I'd like to thank Zilla and Chet and John for coming out and doing the actual participating here tonight. And I'd like to thank everybody who's been watching via YouTube, and we will wrap this up. So everybody have a great night.